Chapter 1157. In the fierce exchange, both of their defenses were broken at the same time. Saint Emohai's sharp fingernails pierced through Lu Ye's chest and only needed a few more inches to pierce through his heart. If that happened, Lu Yi would die for sure no matter how powerful he was. However, Saint Emohai soon discovered that something was wrong because the feeling from his fingernails didn't feel like they had pierced through flesh. Instead, it felt like they had pierced through a thick piece of dead wood. His piercing momentum was greatly hindered. Thus, he immediately understood one thing. This human's physique was not inferior to his at all. Only this way could he resist his stab with the strength of his physique alone. Although he had already sensed that his opponent's physique wasn't weak in the previous battle, he didn't expect it to be this strong. It was simply inconceivable. He hurriedly unleashed his strength to strike while the iron was hot and take Lu Ye's life with a single strike. However, at that moment, he suddenly felt a stabbing pain in his mind. At the same time that his fingernails pierced through Lu Ye's chest, Lu Ye's mountain saber also slashed at him, breaking through his blood chi defenses and leaving a wound on his body. The wound wasn't big. For a battle of this level, it was at most a flesh wound. However, the explosive power of the soul-severing saber caught Saint Emohai off guard. Suddenly, an invisible saber light slashed into his divine sea and ruthlessly slashed at his soul avatar. Saint Emohai grunted in pain and couldn't help but slow down his attack. He didn't even understand what had happened. He didn't even notice that Lu Yi had used his soul power, but his soul had been attacked. The sense of crisis that had been lingering in his heart since the beginning of the battle suddenly reached its peak. Saint Emohai didn't have time to do anything and could only instinctively activate the blood explosion technique. This time, he didn't detonate his own blood essence, but the blood from the wound on Lu Ye's chest. When a muffled sound rang out, Lu Ye's body shook. Blood splashed from his chest and his clothes were torn. In an instant, his flesh and blood were like a lake. However, he didn't seem to feel anything. He wildly swung his mountain saber and a torrent of saber light fell on Saint Emohai like a storm. As soon as the pain in his soul subsided, more and more intense pain assaulted his body, continuing to linger on and on. Holy Sage Emohai finally knew what was so strange about his opponent's saber. It could actually injure his soul while injuring his physical body. What a strange ability, but to him, it was a terrible nightmare. His soul was constantly struck by the invisible blade of light. In the beginning, Saint Emohai was still able to endure it, but a while later he could no longer endure it. He howled out miserably. He howled miserably as he retreated, trying to break free from Lu Ye's attacks. However, Lu Yi had been waiting for this opportunity all this time, and now that it had finally arrived, how could he give up so easily? Like a maggot in the bone, he pursued relentlessly. While fleeing, Saint Venerable Emohai did not give up on counterattacking. He might not have enough battle experience, but his cultivation and strength were still there. Knowing how to react in the face of danger was an instinct in his bones. As Lu Yi swung his saber at him again and again, Saint Venerable Emohai swung his fists at Lu Ye's body. He attempted to use this method of exchanging injury for injury to force Lu Yi to retreat. It wouldn't take too long, just a few breaths of time for him to adjust, and he would be able to recover. At that time, he definitely wouldn't let that saber land on him, not even once. At this point, the battle suddenly entered a white-hot state. This was how a battle of life and death was. Perhaps it would take a very long time to determine a victor, but once one side grasped the slightest opportunity, the battle would instantly become intense. Every time the mountain saber landed, Saint Venerable Emohai would suffer some flesh wounds. Following that, the attacks of the soul would attack his soul avatar, making his mind uneasy. In such a situation, it was impossible for him to break free from Lu Ye's pursuit. In comparison, Lu Ye's injuries were undoubtedly much more serious than his. This was because the wounds left by the mountain pan blade were only superficial wounds. However, every time he retaliated, his fists would make Lu Ye's body creak. The violent power would explode inside Lu Ye's body, and a few of his bones would break. His right eye was bloodshot, and his vision became blurry. He had been hit by Saint Sovereign Emohai's fist head-on. the situation became somewhat comical. Lu Yi, who was clearly more seriously injured, was chasing after Saint Venerable Mo Hai, who was less injured. However, many things could not be judged on the surface. At the very least, both sides knew who had the upper hand and who was at a disadvantage. Gradually, almost no part of Saint Mo Hai's body was left unscathed. His body was covered in crisscrossing scars, and his blood energy protection had long since been shattered. It was completely useless against Lu Ye's fierce attacks. Saint Venerable Mo Hai's miserable cries never stopped. This made the many blood race cultivators watching from afar feel very uneasy. However, they didn't know what was going on in the Blood Sea, so they didn't dare to rashly investigate. Only Lan Qiue, who was also in the Blood Sea, knew the development of the battle like the back of her hand. She had grown a lot in the past few years. After all, every holy seed was the child of destiny of the blood refinement realm. Their cultivation was simple, and she thought she had already surpassed her senior brother when he left. She had wanted to give him a surprise when she saw him again, but she had never thought she would be the one to receive the surprise. Her senior brother was her senior brother, after all. She couldn't fight back against Saint Venerable Mo Hai at all, but her senior brother was able to force him into such a miserable state. She was fascinated. "Let me go, and I won't set foot in the surrounding 50,000 kilometers, Saint Venerable Mo Hai suddenly said. This was undoubtedly a show of weakness. He had no other choice. If this continued, his situation would only worsen, and he might really die here. Although it was a loss of dignity for a holy seed to speak to a human like this, everyone had a survival instinct. He didn't want to die, especially at the hands of a human. Moreover, he felt that even if his enemy could really kill him, they would have to pay a heavy price. Thus, he might be able to negotiate with Lu Chen. It could only be said that Saint Venerable Mo Hai was too naive. How could Lu Yi let him leave so easily now that the battle had developed to this point? Naturally, only one of them would die today. Thus, he was completely indifferent to Saint Venerable Mo Hai's suggestion. In fact, he attacked even more fiercely. Saint Venerable Mo Hai knew what Lu Yi was thinking when he didn't receive a response. He immediately gave up on the idea of living. He no longer screamed because screaming would only make him more miserable. He also fiercely fought back against Lu Ye's attacks. He wanted to gamble that he wouldn't be able to hold on before Lu Yi killed him. The battle of life and death between the two of them was now a battle of willpower and perseverance. Saint Venerable Mo Hai's soul was severely injured, and his mind was in turmoil. Lu Yi had accumulated internal injuries, and his body was damaged. Neither of them was stronger than the other. The Pan Mountain blade slashed down. With a flash of sharp blade light, the blade viciously slashed at Saint Venerable Mo Hai's neck. Lu Yi had slashed at this location many times before. Each time, the injury on Saint Venerable Mo Hai's neck would worsen. This slash had severed half of his neck. If Lu Yi had been a little more vicious and the Pan Mountain blade was a little sharper, he would have been able to decapitate Saint Venerable Mo Hai. When a cultivator's cultivation wasn't high, they only had a slightly stronger physique. They didn't have much of an advantage against other cultivators, but as their cultivation increased, the benefits of a stronger physique would gradually appear. Especially at Saint Sovereign Mo Hai's level, his physique was almost comparable to a spirit treasure. Any other cultivator wouldn't be able to endure this kind of injury, but it was nothing to a body cultivator. As the blade slashed down, Lu Yi took a heavy punch to the chest. His body shook and his heart almost stopped beating. He spat out a mouthful of blood uncontrollably, which quickly merged with the sea of blood. Lu Ye's consciousness also began to fade. It wasn't because of the attack on his soul, but because the accumulation of injuries was too severe. Ever since he stepped onto the path of cultivation, he had never fought an enemy to this extent. This was a crisis, but it was also a trial. If he could survive it, he would be able to see the world. If he couldn't, he would die. He kept slashing out instinctively, trading injury for injury with the enemy. Lu Yi felt like he was going to fall apart, but he maintained an attacking posture from the beginning to the end. He didn't take a single step back. He didn't know how long his enemy could last, but he couldn't fall before his enemy truly fell. At a certain moment, When Lu Yi swung his Pan Mountain blade again at Saint Venerable Mo Hai, the expected counterattack didn't come. Saint Venerable Mo Hai maintained his punching posture. He stood there stiffly as if he had been immobilized. He allowed the blade light to slash at him. His eyes were dark and lifeless, and even the ferocious aura around him had been completely extinguished. He was dead. He wasn't killed by Lu Yi, but by his soul being shattered. The soul-severing blade slashed at his soul again and again. His soul avatar couldn't take it anymore and completely shattered. This was something Lu Yi didn't expect. He had been working hard to cut off Saint Venerable Mo Hai's head, but he didn't succeed. Instead, he destroyed his opponent's soul first. Lu Yi stared at Saint Venerable Mo Hai in front of him and panted heavily. He slowly raised his Pan Mountain blade and slashed down one last time. The blade still slashed at Saint Venerable Mo Hai's neck, but it didn't encounter any resistance. When the blade slashed past, Saint Venerable Mo Hai's head was separated from his body. At the edge of the sea of blood, Lan Qiue quickly rushed towards Lu Yi. She had clearly sensed that this battle was about to end. Lu Yi only had time to withdraw his blood river before his vision turned black and he lost consciousness. Before he lost consciousness, he vaguely heard Lan Qiue's panicked cries. Chapter 1158. The cultivation world of the 9 states was now calm. It had been 4 months since the insect disaster. This period of time could be said to be the most peaceful period in the history of the cultivation world of the 9 states. A lot of information about the blood refinement realm had been spread throughout the 9 states, from the divine ocean to the spirit stream realm. Even some well-informed mortals had heard about it. This realm ruled by the blood race was rapidly approaching the 9 states. It wouldn't be long before the 2 realms would have an earth-shattering collision. This was definitely a huge crisis. If they wanted to survive this crisis, they could only use the power of the entire realm to fight against the blood race. In the face of such an external threat, the Grand Heaven Alliance and the Myriad Demon Ridge seemed insignificant. In addition, the 2 camps had the experience of working together to deal with the insect disaster. It was a consensus that they would work together again to face the enemy. In the land of the 9 regions, the war stopped. All the cultivators were preparing their troops and horses, making all kinds of preparations before the war. On the other hand, the Spirit Stream battlefield and the Cloud River battlefield became more and more lively. This was because there was news that only Cloud River tier cultivators were qualified to participate in this expedition to the blood refinement realm. This was understandable. Spirit Stream tier cultivators were still too low. They could fight on a small scale, but they really couldn't participate in this kind of war between realms and races. However, Spirit Stream tier cultivators also had desires and pursuits. They hoped to advance to the Cloud River tier as soon as possible before the war, so that they could be qualified to participate in this war that would determine the future of the 9 states. Thus, they had a great desire for merit points, and if they wanted to obtain merit points, it was inevitable that they would cause all kinds of trouble. Naturally, this made the Spirit Stream battlefield even more lively. As for those at the Cloud River tier, they were indeed qualified to participate in the battle. However, who wouldn't want to increase their cultivation level as much as possible? Only with a higher cultivation level would they be able to kill more enemies in the future battles and obtain more benefits. Thus, the cultivators on the Cloud River battlefield also caused all kinds of trouble. They had already missed the war to counterattack the insect race's mystery realm, and they didn't want to have any regrets. The high-level cultivators of the 2 camps were well aware of this situation, but they had no intention of stopping it. This was because they also knew that flowers in a greenhouse couldn't withstand the destruction of wind and rain. Only with competition could they grow better. Now that the 2 camps were temporarily working together, it didn't mean that the low-level cultivators had to live in peace. Only by being able to compete and know how to compete would they be able to grow better. Otherwise, it would be difficult for them to be of great use even if they only had cultivation. This was how the cultivators of 9 regions grew up from generation to generation. The true lake and divine sea cultivators, on the other hand, were very peaceful. All of them were holed up in their own sects, cultivating in seclusion. Thanks to the counterattack on the insect race's secret realm, The cultivators who participated in the battle had reaped great benefits. Now, they had already converted these benefits into their own strength. In the peaceful 9 regions, there was a ferociousness hidden inside. It was like a ferocious dog that was quietly sharpening its fangs. When the time was right, it would fiercely attack and give the enemy a fierce bite. No one knew when the time would come, but it shouldn't be too long. This was because the star that represented the blood-refining realm was gradually becoming brighter and bigger in the night sky. The jade blood sex Wuxia had already set off for the blood-refining realm. Unfortunately, there had been no news from there, so the people of 9 regions did not know the situation of the blood-refining realm for the time being. However, 9 regions still had an advantage. This was because, according to Wuxia, there were dozens of old seniors with great cultivation. They had created a human holy land together. Just these dozens of old seniors alone were an incomparably powerful force that people looked forward to. In order to deal with this war, the cultivation world of 9 regions had done a lot of preparation work. For example, with each continent as a unit, the power of the cultivation world was divided into 9 armies. These armies were led by the head cultivators of the 9 continents. There were also some detailed divisions under the armies. When the time came, once the war started, the cultivators could quickly gather together and act in groups. In the end, war was a battle of collective strength. The strength of an individual was still slightly insignificant in a confrontation of this level. Another example was that the pill masters of the various sects were urgently refining all kinds of spirit pills to fill the storage of their sect's spirit pills in case of an emergency. Another example was the Tianji Business Alliance. All the goods that they sold to the outside world were all at a 20% discount, causing many cultivators to fight over them. Because there was no news from the blood refinement realm, 9 regions didn't know what the situation would be like when the war started. They could only try their best to do their best. It was in such an atmosphere that the cultivation world of 9 regions lay dormant and waited. In the blood refining realm, tens of thousands of miles away from the Shunkai Sea, a large number of blood kindred were gathering in the 4 directions. According to the previous calculation, it was not yet time for the blood kindred to besiege the Jade Blood Holy Land. Every time the blood kindred army came to besiege the Jade Blood Holy Land, they would suffer heavy casualties. This was especially true for the middle and low-level blood kindred, who were simply difficult to calculate. Although it was much easier for the blood kindred to grow than the human race, it still took some time. Therefore, in the past, the blood kindred would besiege the Jade Blood Holy Land once every 5 years. 5 years of recuperation was enough for the nearby blood kindred to gather into an army again. However, this time, it was obviously earlier. Firstly, it was because the last line of defense of the Jade Blood Holy Land was broken in the last battle, and the human race lost their last intact barrier. The blood kindred did not want to wait any longer, so they had been actively preparing for this besiege since the last battle. Naturally, the timing was earlier. Secondly, the blood kindred participating this time was much more extensive than before. It almost radiated to half of the southern border of the blood refining realm. There were more than 30 holy seeds of the blood kindred participating alone. This was a number that had never been seen before. In the past, the number of holy seeds was less than half of this number. The blood kindred mainly relied on their advantage in numbers to besiege the Jade Blood Holy Land, not the power of the holy seeds. They were mainly responsible for restraining the top combat forces of the human race. The military force was stronger than before, and the number of holy seeds was also more than before. The blood kindred was determined to win this time's operation to besiege the Jade Blood Holy Land. From their point of view, the blood kindred had no chance of losing this battle. The only problem they had to consider was how to prevent the top combat forces of the human race from escaping while destroying the Jade Blood Holy Land and uprooting this malignant tumor of the human race. These people were not inferior to the holy seeds in terms of strength, and the strongest among them were even stronger than the holy seeds. In particular, Feng Wujiang had a precedent of killing a holy seed. If they couldn't eliminate them completely and let them escape to various parts of the blood refining realm, even the holy seeds would have a headache. After all, there was no such thing as a thief for 1,000 days, but there was no such thing as guarding against thieves for 1,000 days. At this level of individual strength, there was really no way to deal with them if they really wanted to go on a rampage. The holy seeds had gathered recently to discuss this problem, but they hadn't been able to come up with a solution. The order to gather had been issued, and the armies in the 4 directions had basically finished gathering. It would be the appointed time in a few days. At that time, the 4 armies would attack the Shinkei Sea from all 4 directions, just like before, and surround the Jade Blood Holy Land. The Blood Kindred's forces were mainly concentrated in the east, because that was where the gap in the Jade Blood Holy Land's defensive line was located. All the Blood Kindred were very confident about this battle. No one thought there was a chance of failure, so they were sharpening their weapons, and their morale was soaring. In the stone room, Lu Yi slowly woke up. He felt dizzy and his entire body hurt. This made him recall some of his experiences in the Spirit Stream battlefield. At that time, he was hunted down by someone called Dong Shai, and his injuries were so severe that he almost lost his life. In the end, he was picked up by Ruan Lingyu and brought back to the Wandering Society. It was there that he met Hua Si, and through her treatment he slowly recovered. It seemed that he hadn't suffered such severe injuries since that time. Especially after his cultivation had increased, ordinary injuries couldn't cause him to fall into a coma. This time, the battle with Saint Mo was too intense, mainly because Lu Yi had no choice. Even though Saint Mo's strength had been reduced through the suppression of his bloodline, he still had the advantage in terms of strength. If Lu Yi wanted to win, he had to pay a price. Against an enemy like that, exchanging his life with such a result was already a very good outcome. This was all thanks to the soul-severing saber. If it weren't for the soul-severing saber injuring Saint Mo's soul time and time again, Lu Yi wouldn't have been able to win this battle. In the previous battle, his entire body had almost fallen apart. If it weren't for his strong physique, he would have been beaten to death by Saint Mo. He could feel that he had been unconscious for a few days, but he couldn't tell exactly how long it had been. After all, his consciousness had been silent all this time. With the strength of his physique and the foundation of his blood arts, ordinary injuries could be healed very quickly. However, he still felt that his injuries were severe, which showed how miserable he had been before. However, he was in a good mood. Up until now, only eldest senior brother from the human race had the achievement of single-handedly killing a saint seed. None of the other seniors had such a glorious achievement. Previously, Jianghu Hong, Wu Chang, and Wei Fu Feng had killed a holy seed, but the 3 of them had joined forces with her assistance. But now, Lu Yi could achieve the same feat by himself, achieving the same feat as eldest senior brother, and with only a 5th-order divine sea cultivation. If this were to be told, no one would believe it. However, he knew that this didn't mean that his strength was comparable to eldest senior brothers. He could kill Saint Mo mainly because of the suppression of his bloodline, followed by the Soul Cutter and the Blood River. Especially after the Blood River merged, Saint Mo couldn't escape easily. Eldest senior brother, on the other hand, didn't have as many advantages as Lu Yi. Eldest senior brother relied entirely on his own terrifying foundation, which was something that Lu Yi couldn't compare to. Chapter 1159. Although there were various reasons, he still accomplished the feat of single-handedly killing a holy seed. The fame was secondary, the benefits he gained were the real deal. A familiar soft voice came into his ears, with a hint of surprise and relief. "Senior apprentice brother, you're awake." Then, Lan Chiyue's face came into view. Lu Yi responded softly and closed his eyes again to check on his injuries. Fortunately, there were no major problems, and all his injuries were recovering quickly. With his current physique, he would be able to recover in 3 to 5 days. He spread his divine telekinesis and quickly understood his current location. He was in the Bright Moon Cave. Lan Chiyue must have brought him here after he fainted. This small gathering place of the blood breeds had a special meaning to Lan Chiyue. It was here that she met Lu Yi and received a new life. Therefore, after Saint Mo died, although she had many places to go, she chose the Bright Moon Cave. "Junior apprentice Sister Lan, I have something I need you to do," said Lu Yi. "Please say it, senior apprentice brother," replied Lan Qiue solemnly. Saint Emohai is dead. You may take over his territory. Of course. Lan Qiue nodded. Not only could she take over Saint Sage Emohai's territory, she could even take back all of her original territory. If she was willing, it would be the same as having the territory of two Saint Seeds. Within hundreds of thousands of miles, it could be said that she was the dominant force. In front of a holy seed, ordinary blood breeds would not dare to disobey. However, Lan Qiue was worried about Lu Ye's injuries and did not have the heart to do anything else. What do you want me to do, senior apprentice brother? Asked Lan Qiue. I need you to control the nearby territories as much as possible, and then help me collect spirit rice. The more, the better, under the premise that it does not affect the survival of the human race in this world. Controlling the nearby territories was mainly for the future. Of course, it was also to make it easier to collect spirit rice. As for collecting spirit rice, naturally, it was for the sake of the mortals in the 9 states who were suffering under the insect plague. Over the past few years, the survival of the mortals had been greatly suppressed by the insectoids. At the very least, there was no guarantee of survival supplies. Although it had been 4 months since the insectoid disaster, and the mortals should have resumed farming by now, it was hard to say how much harvest there would be and whether it would be enough to satisfy their needs. In contrast, although the mortals of the blood refinement realm lived precarious lives and could be hunted down by the blood race at any time, in their daily lives, they didn't have to worry about food or clothing. Every human village had a large number of spirit fields nearby. Take Tsangnan village, where Lu Yi had once stayed, as an example. There weren't many people in the village, but the food reserves were huge, enough for the villagers to eat for more than 10 years. Moreover, because the concentration of world spirit qi in the blood refining world was far higher than in the 9 regions, the quality of the spirit rice grown by the mortals here was much better than in the 9 regions. If mortals ate it for a long time, it would have the effect of strengthening their body. It could even slowly improve the strength of cultivators with low cultivation base. In this regard, the spirit rice grown in the 9 regions couldn't be compared because the world spirit qi in the 9 regions had never been rich. According to Lu Ye's estimation, the blood race army should be on the way to the Shinkei Sea. In other words, the war between the 2 regions would soon start. At that time, the 9 regions Tianji would use the Tianji pillar to open up the connection between the regions. The cultivators of the 9 regions would also be able to descend from the sky and arrive at the blood refinement realm. First, they would collect a large amount of spirit rice. After the connection between the 2 worlds was completely opened, they would send the spirit rice to the 9 regions. This would certainly alleviate the food shortage of the mortals of the 9 regions. It was inconvenient for him to deal with this kind of matter, so it was just right for Lan Qiue to deal with it. This was one of the reasons why he came back to find Lan Qiue, but he didn't expect her to be in trouble. Fortunately, the final result was satisfactory. I'll do it now. Lan Qiue quickly nodded. Her senior brother had woken up and his injuries were recovering. There was no need for her to continue to stay here. Since her senior brother had ordered, she would naturally obey. She turned her head and looked to the side. Her voice turned cold. Take good care of my senior brother. If there's the slightest mistake, I'll take your life. Not far away, Lu Chang, who was standing against the corner of the wall, trembled. Yes. Previously, when he returned to the Bright Moon Cave from outside, he happened to bump into Lan Qiue, who was returning with Lu Yi. He was almost killed on the spot by Lan Qiue. Fortunately, he revealed his identity as Lu Ye's soul slave in time. That was how he escaped. Lan Qiue quickly left. Lu Chang heaved a sigh of relief. These days, when he was by Lu Ye's side, he didn't feel any pressure. Lu Chang's attitude was never too strict or harsh. However, when facing Lan Qiue, it was different. Perhaps it was because he was worried about Lu Ye's injuries. These few days, Lan Qiue's mood was not good. Under this heavy atmosphere, Lu Chang lived very cautiously. After a few days, Lu Ye's injuries were basically healed under the effect of recuperation and healing pills. At this moment, he was urging his spiritual power to burn a corpse. It was the corpse of Saint Emohai. When Lan Qiue brought the unconscious him back, she didn't forget to bring along the spoils of war. The corpses of ordinary blood breeds were not much of a spoil of war. However, the corpse of a holy seed was different. After burning for a full hour, Saint Emohai's corpse was finally burned clean. With a sweep of the flames and a withdrawal of spiritual power, a drop of golden blood appeared in front of Lu Yi. Holy blood. In comparison, Saint Emohai's holy blood was indeed smaller than the holy blood of the female holy seed who was killed. This was also the reason why he was suppressed by Lu Ye's bloodline. Lu Yi had refined a drop of holy blood before and devoured it. The holy west of the female holy seed had achieved bloodline suppression. He had already killed the female holy seed and devoured her holy blood. After that, Lu Yi realized that this was the only way. At that time, if he wasn't shouldering the mission of placing the divine pillar, he would have gone deep into the underground blood river to search for more holy blood. He wasn't sure if there would be any gains. However, he didn't expect that there would be a pleasant surprise at the end of this journey. His own holiness was already very strong. If he refined this drop of Saint Emohai's holy blood, how strong would his holiness be? Lu Yi was looking forward to it. Just as he was about to refine this drop of holy blood, Lu Ye's expression changed, and he turned to look outside. It was Lan Qiue, who had returned in a hurry. It had only been a few days, and the matter was already settled? When they met, Lu Yi asked and found out that Lan Qiue had indeed completed the task he had given her. It was not strange when he thought about it. The blood breeds respected holy seeds. Now that Saint Emohai was dead, Lan Qiue was the only holy seed in this area. How could the blood breeds resist her? She didn't even need to do anything deliberately. She only needed to find some blood breeds to spread the word, and the heavenly venerables of the various grotto heavens would come and join her. The collection of spirit rice was also in progress. Lu Yi believed that the blood breeds would soon send the spirit rice over. Senior brother, are you going to refine this drop of holy blood? Lan Qiue noticed the drop of golden blood in Lu Ye's hand. The holiness was so strong that it made her feel a little suffocated. That's right. Lu Yi nodded. If he wanted to quickly kill the holy seed in the upcoming battle, he had to improve his own holiness as soon as possible. Refining more holy blood was the fastest and most effective way. Lan Qiue said, Senior brother, holy blood can't be refined casually, especially the blood of an old holy seed. In fact, when she saw Lu Yi again, she had been wondering why Lu Yi also had the divine attribute. Logically speaking, only those who refined the sacred blood could have the divine attribute, but after refining the sacred blood, there were only two outcomes: death or turning into a blood kindred. That was how she became a blood breeds. Lu Yi was obviously different. He was clearly a human, but he had the same holiness as the holy seed. This had never happened in the history of the blood refinement realm. However, senior brother had his own opportunities, so she didn't ask about it. However, if senior brother wanted to refine Saint Emohai's holy blood, the risk would be great. Why do you say that? Lu Yi was puzzled. The female holy seed that was killed before was also an old holy seed. It didn't seem wrong for him to refine her holy blood. Lan Qiue then explained, because even if it is a holy seed, when refining more sacred blood, it will have to bear a great risk. The stronger the holiness in the sacred blood, the greater the risk. Therefore, if the holy seed wants to increase its own holiness, the safest way is to go deep into the blood river to find new sacred blood instead of killing other holy seeds to take it by force. This is because most of the holy seeds have obtained more than one drop of sacred blood. If they refine it this way, they will die without a doubt. This is actually the reason why there are not many holy seeds in this world. Since ancient times, the blood refining realm has given birth to countless holy seeds. Other than a very small number who died in battle, most of them died in the process of refining sacred blood. When Lu Yi heard this, he was surprised. He did not know about such a thing. When he realized that he could consume more sacred blood to increase his holiness, he thought that sacred seeds would often kill each other, which led to the scarcity of sacred seeds. However, he didn't think that there was another reason. It wasn't strange that Lan Qiue knew about this. Relatively speaking, she was already considered a true blood breed. Moreover, she had stayed in the blood refinement realm for a longer time. Naturally, she could find out information that Lu Yi didn't know. For example, if Lan Qiue were to refine Saint Mo Hai's holy blood, she would die without a doubt. This was because the holiness in Saint Mo Hai's holy blood was unbearable for her. If she wanted to improve her own holiness, she could only find new holy blood in the blood river. However, it was also very risky. Not to mention her, even the real old holy seeds wouldn't covet the drop of holy blood in Lu Ye's hands. There was no need for that. Those holy seeds could still tell the difference between risking their own lives and risking their own lives. Chapter 1160. It could be said that the growth of every holy seed was a life and death crisis. This was because in the process of refining new holy blood to increase one's own holiness, the risks were too great. However, they had no choice but to take this risk because if their holiness was not as good as other holy seeds, their life and death would not be under their control. Take Lan Qiue's situation as an example. If Lu Yi had not made arrangements and arrived in time, she would have been killed by holy sage Mo Hai on the spot. Even the holy blood she had refined would have become a gift for others. Lu Yi did not know about this. However, the situation did not seem right because according to Lan Qiue's words, refining holy blood with a stronger holiness than one's own meant death. But Lu Yi had already done this before, so he didn't notice any risks at all. Everything went smoothly. Of course, Lan Qiue was not lying to him. There were only two possibilities for him to be so successful. The information Lan Qiue received was fake, or there was something special about him. Lu Yi was more inclined towards the latter possibility. The burning of the talent tree could refine all impurities and things harmful to oneself. Holy blood was a miraculous thing that could change a human into a blood clan. However, it could only provide Lu Yi with a huge amount of energy and could not change the foundation of a human. This was because the miraculous thing in holy blood was harmful to oneself, so it was burned by the talent tree. Thinking about it, it must be because of the burning of the talent tree that Lu Yi was able to avoid the risk of the holy seed when refining holy blood. This risk could have caused great harm to Lu Yi. In other words, he could refine holy blood at will and continuously increase his holiness without taking any risks. As for whether it was what he thought, he would know after trying. With a thought, Lu Yi opened his mouth and directly threw the drop of holy sage Mo Hai's holy blood into his mouth. Lan Qiue turned pale with fright. Senior brother. She did not understand. She had clearly told senior brother about the taboo of refining holy blood. Why did senior brother still take such a risk? Don't panic. I have confidence. Lu Yi softly shouted. Then he closed his eyes and activated the gluttonous meal to refine the power of the saint blood that he had swallowed. As time passed, Lan Qiue watched anxiously. But miraculously, Lu Yi did not seem to be in any danger at all. He sat there quietly, the spiritual energy and aura around him fluctuating together. This was a sign of his strength slowly increasing. Moreover, the divine nature that permeated from Lu Ye's body was also increasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Lan Qiue was amazed. She couldn't understand what Lu Yi had done. How could he be safe and sound after swallowing a drop of blood essence? For a moment, he wondered if there was something wrong with the information he had gathered. Just as Lu Yi began to refine the drop of holy blood, the blood race armies gathered in the four directions of the divine gate C also arrived at the appointed time. Under the command of the holy seeds, the armies in the four directions moved out at the same time, rushing towards the divine gate C like a swarm of locusts. The number of holy seeds they had was much higher than before. In addition, there was a gap in the defensive line of the holy land of jade blood. It could be said that the blood race was determined to win this war. At the same time, in the cultivation world of the 9 prefectures, almost all the cultivators above the divine ocean tier had a mysterious feeling. The day of the expedition to the blood refinement realm was not far away. It was self-evident where this feeling came from. Thus, even though the feeling was mysterious, the divine ocean tier cultivators believed it without a doubt. They began to prepare even more intensely. The news was constantly passed down from the higher-ups. In just a few days, the huge Cloud River battlefield suddenly became empty. Almost all the Cloud River tier cultivators left this place and returned to their own sections. This was definitely the biggest spectacle in the history of the 9 prefectures. Ever since the Cloud River battlefield, this place had been the stage for the Cloud River tier cultivators to be active. Every day, there would be noise and excitement. There had never been a day when it had become so empty. Many cultivators gathered at the Jade Blood Sect's main peak, with Shui Yuan as their leader. The Jade Blood Sect now had a total of 4 Divine Ocean tier cultivators: the sect leader, Yun Xuechu, Shui Yuan, and Lu Yi. Strictly speaking, Yun Xuechu was not a member of the Jade Blood Sect. She was just a loose cultivator. Thus, she would not participate in this expedition to the Blood Refinement Realm. She could stay behind to guard the sect. Someone had to stay behind to guard the sect in case anything happened. It was inevitable that the headmaster would go to the Blood Refining Realm. Because of Lu Yi, he now had more and more authority in the Force Province. He was even one of the leaders of the newly established cultivator army of the Force Province. In addition, the expedition to the Blood Refining Realm was led by Lu Yi, so he would definitely participate in it. However, it was precisely because he was the leader of the army of the War Province that he could leave everything in the sect to Shui Yuan. Shui Yuan was not weak now, and she was also a medical cultivator. In any large-scale battle, the role of medical cultivators could not be ignored. This was especially true for Divine Ocean tier medical cultivators. They were absolutely indispensable talents. There were many cultivators gathered here, but only a small portion belonged to the Jade Blood Sect. Moreover, most of them were in the Cloud River tier. Only Yi and Giant Armor were in the True Lake tier. At most, there was also Hupa. Most of them were from the Ziwei Taoist Palace. As a subordinate sect of the Jade Blood Sect, the Ziwei Taoist Palace had not been in the 9 continents for long. Therefore, they had not produced any Divine Ocean tier cultivators. On the contrary, there were many cultivators in the True Lake tier. This was because when they were in the Wushuang continent, the Ziwei Taoist Palace had many cultivators who had reached the limit of the Cloud River tier but could not break through. After coming to the 9 continents, many of them had broken through to the True Lake tier. Pang Huanin and Shui Yuan worked together and decided to combine the disciples of the 2 sections. This way, they could complement each other. No one knew the exact time of the great battle, so all they could do was to gather their forces and wait quietly. In the Bright Moon Cave in the Blood Refinement Realm, Lu Yi spent several days refining the Saint Blood of Saint Emohai. Just like before, he did not feel any danger. His own saint nature had improved a lot, but not as much as he had imagined. This was understandable. The improvement of one's saint nature was not a simple addition, but a more complicated state. It could be said that the stronger one's saint nature was, the harder it was to improve it. However, Lu Yi estimated that in the current blood refining world, his own saintly nature should be considered the strongest among all the saint seeds. Perhaps there were saint seeds with a stronger saintly nature than his own, but there would not be too many of them, because there were not many saint seeds to begin with. In addition to the improvement of his saint nature, there was also an increase in his cultivation. Although he did not break through to the next realm, Lu Yi felt that he had taken a big step forward from the 5th order realm. This was because every drop of saint blood contained a huge amount of energy, which was of great help to his strength improvement. Over the past few days, Lan Qiyu had been nervously paying attention to Lu Ye's movements, fearing that something would happen to him. Fortunately, Lu Ye's state was very stable from the beginning to the end. This surprised Lan Qiyu, but on second thought, her senior brother was a human and even had the saint nature of a saint seed. Moreover, he was stronger than Saint Emohai, so it was not strange that there were no uncontrollable risks when refining the saint blood. However, at this moment, the pressure she felt facing Lu Yi was undoubtedly much greater. "Congratulations, senior brother." Seeing Lu Yi open his eyes, Lan Qiyu spoke. Lu Yi gently nodded, his expression neither sad nor happy. After pondering for a moment, he turned his head to look at Lu Chang, who was standing respectfully to the side. "You can leave." Lu Chang bowed and hurriedly retreated. After he left, Lu Yi looked at Lan Qiyu and gestured with his hand, "Sit." Lan Qiyu sat in front of Lu Yi obediently. Lu Yi pondered for a moment before saying, "Since you call me senior brother, I will accept you as a disciple of Blue Blood sect on behalf of my sect master." Lan Qiyu tilted her head and looked puzzled. Blue Blood sect? There were no sects in the blood refinement realm, and because of the unique way of growth of the blood race, there was no such thing as a family. All blood race cultivators only had one mother, the underground blood river. It was the blood river that gave birth to them and allowed them to grow quickly, so they naturally did not need a family. This was also the reason why the blood race would take the name of the first human they killed for their own use. When they walked out of the blood river, no one gave them a name, so they could only use this method to obtain their own name. Lan Qiyu did not know about Lu Ye's background before, and Lu Yi had never told her about this. If Lan Qiyu was really from the blood race, even if there was some friendship between them, Lu Yi would not tell her too much. However, she was still a human after all. It was only because she refined a drop of sacred blood by chance that she became a blood race. Although there were changes in the race, the heart of the human race had never changed. Therefore, Lu Yi felt that there were some things that she should know. The Jade Blood sect is a sect in a realm called the Nine Regions, and I come from that realm called the Nine Regions. Lu Yi explained some of the situation in Nine Regions and his own origin. Lan Qiyu's beautiful eyes lit up and she was fascinated. As a human born in the blood refining realm, she had lived under the slavery and oppression of the blood race since she was young. She had always lived in fear. She had never thought that there was another world in this world, a world that was purely dominated by the human race. And the senior martial brother that she respected the most actually came from such a region. There were no blood race in that world, so there was no need to be alarmed. That world was dominated by the human race, and there were many clans and sections. That world was so beautiful that it made people yearn for it. There is a holy land of blue blood in the southern border, which was founded by the cultivators of Nine Regions. The last time I left from here, I went to the southern border and met many people there. After that, I returned to Nine Regions. A few months ago, I came back from Nine Regions. Lan Qiyu only felt her heart beating wildly. There was actually another world in this world, a world that was purely dominated by the human race. And the senior martial brother that she respected the most actually came from such a region. There were no blood race in that world, so there was no need to be alarmed. That world was dominated by the human race, and there were many clans and sections. That world was so beautiful that it made people yearn for it. There is a holy land of blue blood in the southern border, which was founded by the cultivators of Nine Regions. The last time I left from here, I went to the southern border and met many people there. After that, I returned to Nine Regions. A few months ago, I came back from Nine Regions. Lan Qiyu only felt her heart beating wildly. Can the blood refining realm and Nine Regions interact with each other? If so, then the world called Nine Regions was even more desirable. Chapter 1161. Lu Yi nodded. It used to be very difficult, but it should be easy soon. The cultivators of the Nine Regions already knew about the situation in the blood refining realm, and they also knew what happened to the human race here. Therefore, the cultivators of the Nine Regions were preparing for an expedition to this realm. Calculating the time, it should be about time. At that time, many cultivators of the Nine Regions would come here to kill the vampires and save the humans who were enslaved by the vampires. Lan Qiyu was so excited that her face turned red, even though the skin of the blood race was red. She pursed her red lips and asked carefully, "I am now a blood race. Is it really okay to join the Jade Blood sect?" Lu Yi smiled and said, "In the cultivation world of the Nine Regions, the estrangement between races is not as serious as it is here. Many sects have demon cultivators as disciples. Their treatment and situation are the same as that of the human race, so you can join our sect. Moreover, your situation is special. When the time comes, I will explain everything to the headmaster, and I believe that the headmaster will accept you." Lan Qiyue's eyes turned red. "Thank you, senior martial brother." 59. There is a process of Tianji witnessing the recruitment of disciples. You will know when the time comes. When the battle between the two worlds ends, you can follow me back to the 9 regions and complete the process of joining the sect. Yes, I will listen to Senior Marshal Brothers' arrangements. Lan Qiue felt that she was simply too lucky. She met Lu Yi here and was saved by him. Now, she even had the chance to go to the 9 regions and join the Jade Blood sect. There were billions of humans in the blood refining world, and she was undoubtedly the most special one. Wu Rong said, "There is nothing he needs to do now." Lan Qiue sat upright. "Senior Marshal Brother, please instruct me." After learning everything about the 4 provinces, learning about the Jade Blood sect, and being accepted as a disciple by Lu Yi, your entire spirit, energy, and spirit have changed too much. Wu Rong took out an item. You have placed something called the Tianji Pillar in the Wrestling Grotto Heaven. Lu Chang knows its location. He is now going to the Wrestling Grotto Heaven and overseeing this place. When the time comes, this Tianji Pillar will break through the ground. The cultivators of the 4 regions can use this Tianji Pillar to teleport here. You know who will come. He will show his identity by holding this item. We will make things difficult for him. What I took out was actually my identity token as a disciple of the Jade Blood sect. Shui Yuan had personally given it to me when I returned from the Spirit Stream battlefield. Every disciple of the Jade Blood sect didn't have an identity token like that. It contained a cultivator's basic information, and because it involved the secrets of the heavens, identity tokens were similar to the provincial guard tokens. They could be replicated. Lan Qiue took the nameplate and nodded solemnly. Now that you know, I don't have anything else to tell you. Lu Yi thought for a moment and said, unless the cultivators of the 4 prefectures are in mortal danger, he will help us kill the enemy. 29 To the cultivators of the 4 prefectures, every living member of the blood race was a walking war achievement. Therefore, it was not a bad thing for others to help kill the enemy. This was equivalent to stealing war achievement, which was a taboo for the cultivators of the 4 prefectures. When the time came, Wu Rongyan would only need to activate her own holiness to assist. Also, have the blood clans send all the spirit rice they've collected to the wrestling paradise. It doesn't matter which group of cultivators from the 4 prefectures come. He must immediately state his identity as a disciple of the Jade Blood sect and inform us of the territory you've marked out. Lan Qiue nodded, indicating that she had remembered everything. After a while, you quickly left. Lu Chang also followed. After a while, Lu Yi also left Bright Moon Cave. He flew straight to the nearest blood pool entrance. After several days of recuperation, the injuries from the battle with Saint Sage Mo Hai had not healed. This was not a disadvantage brought about by a weak physique. Even if he was injured, it would be easier for him to recover than other cultivators. This was a convenience unique to body cultivators. With Lu Ye's current weak physique, if I said I was a body cultivator, there would be people who would accept it. The blood pool was not far from Bright Moon Cave. With Wu Rong's current speed, it would take a while for him to arrive. That place was where Zhang Jilai and Lan Qiue had retreated to. However, the two of them had met the same fate. Zhang Jilai had died. Outside, Lan Qiue had been reborn. Lu Yi did not have any other purpose in coming here. The main reason was that there was enough time for him to return to the Shen KC. Since that was the case, there was a need to hurry. When the 4th year completely connected to the blood refining realm, there was a small chance that I could use the Tianji Pillar to teleport to various places. If I wanted to rush to the Shun KC, it would only take an instant. The blood refinement realm was also suitable for cultivation. Although the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was rich, compared to the cultivation methods in the 4 prefectures, it paled in comparison. For someone like Lu Yi who was used to eating delicacies from land and sea, suddenly being forced to eat chaff and pickled vegetables was not difficult to swallow. Therefore, I wanted to explore the blood river on the ground. The blood river on the ground ran through the entire blood refining realm. The sacred blood was also hidden in the blood river on the ground. Moreover, the blood race was nurtured and grew in it. I really wanted to know if there was anything special outside. Of course, if I could find a few drops of sacred blood to refine, it would be quite good. Just as I arrived at the blood pool entrance, a slender figure climbed out of the blood pool. His body was covered in red light and his face was young. He looked like a blood race who had just matured. The blood race's blood fetus would be sent back to the blood pool. Then the blood race would hatch. The young blood race would continue to grow in the blood river, absorbing the nutrients of the blood river. They would only leave when they matured. The entire process only took a few years. Therefore, the blood race's growth time was much slower than that of humans. Moreover, every blood race member who walked out of the blood river was a natural-born cultivator. Their cultivations were generally at the spirit stream realm. There were even some blood race members with exceptional talent who could reach the cloud river realm. This was an advantage that humans simply could not compare to. The timing of Lu Ye's arrival was also quite coincidental. The blood race member behind him did not look like someone who had just matured. The moment our eyes met, the blood race member revealed a sinister smile and said in a hoarse voice, "Human." The reason why his voice was hoarse was probably because it was his first time speaking and he was not used to it yet. As I spoke, I pounced toward Lu Yi, the fangs at the corner of my mouth shining with a cold light. Wu Rong only looked at me with a fervent gaze. Then his sword flashed. The sinister smile of the blood race member immediately stiffened. Lu Ye's figure blurred, brushing past me and entering the blood pool. It was only after Lu Ye's figure disappeared that the blood race's head rolled to the surface. A head fell to the ground. If I on the ground, my eyes were wide open, but they could not close. Perhaps I could not understand why a human did not have the guts to kill me. The blood river seemed to forever flow with endless blood. It was extremely viscous. Wu Rong would think too little about it in the future, but when he entered the blood river that time, he inexplicably recalled the strange scene he had seen when he overlooked the entire blood refining world. The entire blood refining world looked like a gourd, but it also looked like the body of a male creature whose head and 7 limbs had been cut off. If that was really the case, then the blood river that ran through the entire blood refining world was the blood vessels of this male creature. The blood in the blood river was not your blood. The so-called sacred blood was your essence blood. Lu Yi hurriedly reined in his thoughts. I still felt that I had thought too little. After all, the blood refining world was so big and small. How could there not be such a small creature in the world? If there really were no sacred blood, then this Suishan would not be an existence that could destroy stars and worlds. How could such an existence not have such a miserable fate? Suppressing the thoughts in his heart, Lu Ye's figure sank upward. In the future, before I refined the sacred blood, when I retreated into the blood river, I would still need to use the talent tree's power to protect myself. Because for a human body, retreating into the blood river was not a big risk. But now that I had a weak sacred nature, I did not need the talent tree's protection. Like any other sacred seed, I could freely swim in the blood river. If I wanted to refine the power in the blood river for my own use, I would need to use the talent tree's fuel reserves. The entrance to the blood pool was small, but it was extremely deep. Lu Yi only felt that he had sunk thousands of meters down before reaching the bottom. During the process, I would occasionally encounter some mature vampires. The closer I got to the entrance, the smaller the vampires became. And the higher I went, the larger the vampires became. I killed all the vampires that I did not encounter. I would be soft-hearted because those vampires had not yet matured, but I would also be merciful because we had not been stained with the blood of humans. The vampires did not have the innate contempt for humans. I could see this from the vampires I met at the entrance. I had clearly just matured, but I did not attack Wu Rong at first sight. During the expedition of the cultivation world of the 4 continents, the strategy against the vampires was to exterminate them. Therefore, it did not matter whether they were female, male, old, or young. As long as they were vampires, they would be killed. When he reached the bottom of the blood pool, Lu Ye's divine sense swept over and immediately sensed the blood fetuses placed outside. That was clearly a coincidence. It was only because the area outside wasn't above the entrance of the blood pool. The place where the blood race would have placed the blood fetus from the blood pool wasn't here. Almost every entrance to the blood pool was directly above the same scene. Similarly, he did not show any mercy and destroyed the blood fetuses one by one. Only then did Wu Rong end his search in the blood river. The holy seeds should often enter and exit the blood river on the ground, but they need to cultivate. The cultivation of a holy seed is very complicated. Once it is used for many years before it is born, its cultivation will reach perfection. We frequently enter and exit the blood river on the ground in pursuit of less holy blood and a weaker holy nature. Every holy seed's holy nature basically grew in this way. The practice of killing other holy seeds and seizing their holy blood was not advocated in the blood refining world. In the blood river, Lu Yi spent several days in a row. Every holy seed's holy nature basically grew in this way. The practice of killing other holy seeds and seizing their holy blood was not advocated in the blood refining world. In the blood river, Lu Yi did not find anything for several days. He did not even find a drop of holy blood, let alone find any magical places in the underground blood river. However, it was not strange when he thought about it. If holy blood was really so easy to find, then the number of holy seeds in the blood refining world would not be so rare. Please enter .com in your browser to view. Chapter 1162. Last time, Lu Yi was able to obtain a drop of sacred blood in the Divine Gate Ocean. This was both due to luck and his unique cultivation method. When he was cultivating, he activated the power of his talent tree. His entire body was like a bottomless black hole, crazily devouring everything around him. That drop of sacred blood must have flowed nearby at that time and was attracted to him. If Lu Yi hadn't used that cultivation method, he wouldn't have had a chance to obtain the sacred blood. This method relied too much on luck, and it also consumed a lot of his talent tree, so it wasn't easy to use. If Lu Yi wanted to find more sacred blood, he could only rely on luck. Of course, finding the sacred blood was secondary. His main goal was to uncover the secrets of the blood river. As for whether he would be able to find anything, that was uncertain. Time passed. In the Divine Gate Ocean, on the Jade Blood Sacred Land's sacred mountain, Feng Wujiang led many of the human race's top cultivators to wait solemnly. The Holy Land had already investigated the movements of the Blood Race Army, and they had been waiting for this day. According to their previous plans and speculations, the day the Blood Race Army launched an attack on the Jade Blood Holy Land would be the day the opportunity arrived. Now, the opportunity had finally arrived. The Tianji pillars that Lu Yi had left behind had already been placed around the Divine Gate Ocean. When the time came, they would naturally break through the ground and become a teleportation anchor point for the 9 states cultivators. Inside the Jade Blood Sacred Land, there were also 2 Tianji pillars. This way, a portion of the 9 states cultivators could directly teleport into the Jade Blood Sacred Land and fill in the gaps in their forces. Cultivators flew over from all directions of the Divine Gate Ocean, reporting all the information they had gathered. As time passed, the Blood Tribe army drew closer and closer to the sacred land. They were so close that the cultivators could already vaguely see the vast and mighty army of the enemy. When the Blood Tribe army was only half a day away from the sacred land, Feng Wujiang let out a sigh of relief. He turned to the many top cultivators of the human race and entrusted this battle to them. T1 Although they had the entire cultivation world of the 9 states as a solid shield, it wasn't without risk for the Jade Blood Sacred Land. They had to resist the initial attack of the Blood Tribe army and by the cultivators of the 9 states' time to gather and teleport. Fortunately, this shouldn't be too difficult. Every time the Blood Race came to encircle and annihilate the humans, they would send a large number of small fries to exhaust the human race's strength. There was indeed a gap in the Holy Land's last line of defense, but it shouldn't be a problem to hold on for a while. As long as they could hold on until the arrival of the 9 regions' reinforcements, they would be able to stabilize their footing. Everyone returned the greeting before quickly dispersing according to their assigned positions. In an instant, the atmosphere on the Saint Isle turned somber. The formation of the Blood Race Army became clearer and clearer. Compared to the past, their military strength was undoubtedly much larger. Furthermore, according to the information obtained by the Holy Island, the number of holy seeds accompanying the army this time was also incomparable to the past. The difference was at least twice as large. This time, The blood race was determined to eradicate the Jade Blood Holy Land. There was no announcement before the battle, nor was there any probing. When the blood race army arrived at the designated position, as usual, a large number of blood race cultivators activated their blood arts and gathered a river of blood. In an instant, the sky was covered with a sea of blood. Countless blood race cultivators wailed and howled from the sea of blood. As the sea of blood surged, they launched an attack on the Jade Blood Holy Land. A moment later, on the small defensive island of the Holy Land, the power of the formations was activated. Overwhelming streams of light shot out in all directions, hitting the vast sea of blood. Most of the attacks were neutralized by the power of the sea of blood, but the edges of the sea of blood were also constantly melting under the continuous attacks. The moment the blood race cultivators hiding in the sea of blood revealed themselves, they would die without a burial place. For a moment, the corpses of the blood race cultivators fell down like dumplings. Looking down from the sky, it looked like there were 4 blood clouds corroding the Holy Island, but they were offset by the continuous light. The more the blood clouds pushed forward, the more difficult it was to move forward. The moment the battle between the two sides began, the entire Holy Island shook violently. 111 up. On the east and west ends of the Holy Island, 2 pillars of divine secrets rose from the ground in 2 open spaces. As the pillars of divine secrets broke through the ground, the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth was crazily devoured. In a short moment, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was consumed. It was also at this moment that the countless cultivators in the 9 regions who had been waiting suddenly opened their eyes in unison, each of them having a realization. In Grand Heaven City, the Hall of Divine Secrets had been demolished, leaving only a bare pillar of divine secrets standing there. Around the pillar of divine secrets, countless cultivators sat upright and waited. At the position closest to the pillar of divine secrets, Pang Zhen, Long Bo, and Tang Yifeng stood up at the same time. Pang Zhen shouted in a low voice, "Let's go!" The 3 of them raised their hands and pressed on the pillar of divine secrets. Their figures instantly disappeared. Following closely behind the 3 of them, the army of the war province formed by the elite powerhouses of the 2 camps came one after another. The pillar of divine secrets seemed to have turned into a black hole, and all the cultivators who touched it disappeared in an instant. On the Jade Blood Sect's front, Shui Yuan had an epiphany. "It's begun." She turned to look at Pang Huanin. "I'll go scout the way first. You guys follow me." "All right." Pang Huanin nodded. "Senior Martial Sister, be careful. Let's go." Shui Yuan raised her hand and pressed on the pillar of divine secrets. The old sect master of the Pill Heart sect, who had been in seclusion for many years, had come out. The old sect master had gone into seclusion to comprehend the mysteries above the divine ocean realm. However, ever since Lu Yi revealed the secrets of the world, the top divine ocean realm cultivators of the 9 regions finally understood that the reason they couldn't break through their current realms wasn't because they didn't work hard enough, nor was it because they weren't talented enough. It was because the world wasn't enough. In this way, it was meaningless to stay in seclusion for so long. Therefore, the old sect master came out of seclusion. With him as the leader, 80% of the cultivators of the Pill Heart sect, starting from the Cloud River realm, would participate in this expedition. There were many cultivators here, but not all of them were from the Pill Heart sect. This was because some of the elites had joined the army of the war province. This was the choice of every major sect. They wouldn't put all their eggs in one basket. Splitting their forces into 2 was the wisest choice. If possible, they would have split their forces more. However, considering that they weren't familiar with the situation in the blood refinement realm and didn't know the strength of the blood race there, they finally decided to send some elites to join the army while the rest acted as a whole. This choice was exactly the same as the Jade Blood Sect. However, the Jade Blood Sect had joined forces with the Ziwei Dao Palace. Qiu Min stood quietly in the crowd. Her expression was normal, but her heart was in turmoil. Ever since Lu Yi came and told her about the Jade Blood Holy Land and Feng Wujiang, Qiu Min had been looking forward to this day. Seeing was believing. Even though she knew Lu Yi wouldn't lie to her about something like this, She didn't dare to believe it so easily until she saw Feng Wujiang with her own eyes. As the saying went, the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Especially for her, she had already accepted Feng Wujiang's death. If she was given a glimmer of hope at this time and it was destroyed, the impact would be unimaginable. A warm hand held her hand. Qiumin turned her head and saw Feng Yuechuan. The mother and daughter looked at each other and smiled. Qiumin was looking forward to this day, and so was Feng Yuechuan. She had no impression of her own father, because when Feng Wujiang died in battle, she was still in Qiumin's stomach. Ever since she was born, she had never seen Feng Wujiang. However, she had grown up listening to all kinds of legends about Feng Wujiang. She worshipped and respected her father more than anyone else. She thought she would never have the chance to see him again in this lifetime. Who would have thought that things would take such a turn? Beside the two of them, Li Baxian's expression was extremely grave. He had been worried about one thing. When he saw his eldest senior brother later, would he be beaten to death? Although he had always corrected the way Feng Yuechuan addressed him, he had never truly referred to himself as her martial uncle. The two of them were childhood sweethearts who had grown up together. Back when his spiritual orifices had been destroyed and he had been stuck in the spirit stream realm, Feng Yuechuan had even suppressed her own cultivation for his sake. She would rather not break through than stay in the spirit stream battlefield to accompany him. It had to be said that those years were the golden years for cultivators in the upper realm. How could he not know Feng Yuechuan's feelings for him? However, due to the difference in seniority, he didn't dare to face his own heart. He always wanted to drag it out, but now he knew that he couldn't drag it out any longer. He was about to see his eldest senior brother. If he dragged it out, his eldest senior brother might really beat him up. He was a sword cultivator. In this world, there were only sword cultivators who didn't shy away from danger. There were no sword cultivators who retreated and cowered. Li Baxian immediately made up his mind. His figure couldn't help but straighten up. He felt his sword heart brighten. Qiumin felt something and couldn't help but glance at Li Baxian. Soon after, she revealed a pensive expression and pursed her lips into a smile. "Let's go," she called out and led Feng Yuechuan and Li Baxian forward. At the nameless mountain peak, there was an abandoned pillar of heaven's fate. Many years ago, there was a sect here. However, it was later destroyed and the pillar of heaven's fate was left behind. Tai Shan walked towards the pillar of heaven's fate with a smile on his face. He really didn't expect that what Lu Yi had told him would actually happen. When Lu Yi had come to talk to him about certain things, although he didn't think that Lu Yi was lying to him, his instinctive caution still made him not dare to have too much expectation and hope. Until now. Yu Daiwei followed behind him with a face full of surprise. Because after following Tai Shan for so many years, she had never seen Tai Shan have such an expression. It seemed like he was looking forward to it, but also seemed a little nervous. In her mind, Tai Shan was a man full of the unknown, but also an omnipotent man. It was hard to imagine that such a man would have such a strange expression. After a short while, the two came to the pillar of heaven's fate. They raised their hands and pressed it. "I hope you're still alive." Tai Shan whispered softly and disappeared. At the same time, all over the 9 regions, in front of the pillars of heaven's fate of sects, figures disappeared one after another. In just less than an incense stick's worth of time, more than 80% of the cultivators in the 9 regions had disappeared. Please enter .com to view it in your browser. Chapter 1163. In the holy island of the Divine Gate Sea, as soon as Pangjin, Longbo, and sect master Feng appeared, they realized that they were no longer in the 9 states. This was because the entire world gave off a completely different feeling. This was the aura of a completely foreign world. Not only was it different, but the moment they appeared, endless malice suddenly descended, causing them to involuntarily shiver. It was as if there was a pair of invisible eyes staring at them, emitting great malice. On the holy island, the wind and clouds suddenly changed. Black clouds gathered in the sky, and within those black clouds, lightning flashed continuously, as if it could fall at any time. The 3 of them were shocked, and no one understood what was happening. But in the next moment, the feeling of being stared at suddenly disappeared. Above the black clouds in the sky, rolling thunder continued to rumble, and an extremely mysterious feeling emerged. There were clearly no fluctuations of spiritual energy, but it gave people the feeling that there were two extremely mysterious existences fighting above the 9 heavens. It's divine punishment. A dry voice suddenly sounded in the ears of the three. The three of them quickly looked over and saw a hunchbacked old woman standing not far away. Her face was wrinkled, and she looked like she was about to die. If such an old woman was placed in a crowd, no one would pay much attention to her, but with the information provided by Lu Yi, how could the three of them not know that this old woman was one of the top powerhouses of the human race? No one could underestimate her. With a thought, they roughly understood the other party's identity. The three of them quickly stepped forward and bowed. Pang Zhen asked, "Are you Grandma Du?" Granny Jiao smiled kindly, "That's me." The top powerhouses of the Jade Blood Holy Land were currently participating in the encirclement of the Blood Race Army. Granny Jiao stayed here to receive the reinforcements from the 9 states and explain some information to them. She was a medical cultivator, so she was suited for this task. Although they had guessed, when she personally admitted it, Pang Zhen and the others still looked serious. The person in front of them was the second Valley Master of the Medicine King Valley, one of the greatest medical cultivators in the history of the 9 states. Whether it was strength or status, the three of them were at the top of the 9 states, but in front of this person, they were still lacking. Longbow humbly asked, "Does the blood-refining realm also have divine punishment?" There were heavenly punishments in the 9 prefectures. For example, if someone violated the heavenly oath they made, they would be punished by the heavens. This was called heavenly punishment. If that was the case, wouldn't the blood-refining realm also have an existence similar to the 9 prefectures Tianji? This was not a good thing. The blood-refining world has its own will of heaven and earth. Naturally, there will be heavenly punishment. You are here because of the invasion of creatures from the outside world. Granny Jiao explained, the last time Lu Yi came here, he was targeted by the heavenly punishment, but he had a unique method to resolve it, so he was able to come out unscathed. So the current situation is, when they came here, they did feel the malice of the world, as if a great crisis would befall them at any time. But now, that feeling didn't seem to be there. The 9 prefectures' heavenly secrets is fighting against the world's will. The three of them suddenly realized what was going on. Because the 9 prefectures' heavenly secrets was fighting against the world's will had no spare energy to send down heavenly punishment. Otherwise, the cultivators of the 9 prefectures would definitely be injured or killed by heavenly punishment. It was not something that could be resisted by human strength. While they were talking, a large number of cultivators continued to appear around the heavenly secrets pillars. Not only the heavenly secrets pillars here, but the heavenly secrets pillars on the other side of the sacred island were also in the same situation. However, because they had just arrived and didn't understand the situation, they temporarily gathered together and didn't act rashly. At the same time, the sounds of the battle between the Sacred Island's defense system and the Blood Race's encirclement army came from all directions and were perceived by everyone. Valley Master Jiao, we have just arrived. If there is anything we can do, please ask for instructions, Pang Zhen said. Granny Jiao nodded. I believe that Lu Yi has already explained the general situation of the Sacred Island to you. He brought a batch of heavenly secrets pillars with him this time. In addition to the 2 pillars on the Sacred Island, there are many more around the Shen KC. Since you have appeared on the Sacred Island, I believe that the other 9 prefectures' heavenly secrets pillars will also appear. The Sacred Lord has previously ordered this old woman to immediately send a message to the 9 prefectures' cultivators around the Shen KC after receiving you and have them surround you from the outside. At that time, you can cooperate with the Sacred Island's forces and attack the Blood Race by surprise. Pang Zhen understood and nodded. Very good. Valley Master Jiao, please wait for a moment. While speaking, the 3 of them quickly sent out messages and asked many questions. In the past, the cultivators of the 9 prefectures couldn't send messages so casually in the Blood Race, but now, many of the heavenly secrets pillars had broken through the ground. With the heavenly secrets pillars as a transit point for messages, it could be said that the 9 prefectures' cultivators here were no different from the 9 prefectures. After a short while, the 3 of them revealed looks of surprise. This was because they discovered that among the 9 armies of the 9 prefectures, only the army of the War Province had appeared directly on the sacred island. The armies of the other 8 prefectures were scattered in 8 directions around the Jianghu Sea. It had to be known that the armies of each prefecture were formed by the elites of the various sects and clans of the various prefectures. The 9 armies represented the most elite forces of the 9 prefectures, but now, they were all gathered in the Jianghu Sea. This was clearly not a coincidence, but a deliberate move by the heavenly secrets. Since they were teleported from the 9 prefectures, they couldn't choose their destination. Where they would be teleported depended on which channel the heavenly secrets opened for them. This was interesting. Originally, they were still a little worried about what tactics to use after arriving at the blood race. If they couldn't appear near the Jianghu Sea, how could they travel more efficiently? Now, there was no need to worry about these worries. With Lu Ye's previous arrangements and the cooperation of the heavenly secrets, they had already prepared their tactics in advance. All they needed to do was to kill the enemy with all their strength. It could be said that the path was already paved, and they just needed to follow it forward. Was there anything more relaxing than this? Pang Zhen and the others immediately sent messages to the leaders of the other armies to inform them of the situation. After a short while, the 8 elite armies from the 8 different directions of the Divine Watchtower Sea moved out and flew toward the Divine Watchtower Sea. In an instant, streaks of light covered the sky, and there were even treasured ships among them. The army's momentum was booming, and it would probably take them a few days to reach the battlefield. At that time, they would be able to surround the Blood Race army that was attacking the Jade Blood Holy Land. "Does the Holy Land's defense need any help?" the sect master asked. Granny Jiao understood his intentions and smiled. "If you're interested, you can also participate. However, don't use too much force to avoid alerting the enemy." The 3 of them understood, and the sect master hurriedly said, "This old man will go take a look." After saying that, he rushed out. Pang Zhen reacted quickly and hurriedly followed. "I'll also go take a look at the enemy." Longbow was left behind with his eyes wide open. This old man also wants to go take a look. He had heard from Lu Yi that there were many peak powerhouses here, and each of them was a character who could suppress an era. Now that the Blood Race army was encircling them, the scene would definitely be lively. Who wouldn't want to see such a scene with their own eyes? Pang Zhen's voice came from afar. "Brother Long, stay behind and watch over the army to prevent chaos." Longbow was about to die from anger. "You 2 bastards!" He hated himself for being too slow. Even if he ate sh*t, he wouldn't be able to keep up with the heat. He had no choice but to stay behind and watch over the army. This was something that couldn't be helped. The armies of the War Province were formed by the elites of the 2 great camps. If no one stayed behind, there might really be some trouble. The invasion of the 9 provinces' cultivators had caused a huge reaction from the Blood Refinement Realm's will. Outside, the sky was covered by dark clouds, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. The entire realm's atmosphere was so heavy that it was difficult to breathe. The Blood Race powerhouses who came to attack the Jade Blood Sacred Ground were not blind. They naturally noticed these changes, but no one knew how these changes were triggered. This was the disadvantage of the will of heaven and earth not being strong enough. There was no way to transmit accurate information. The so-called heavenly punishment was just the will of heaven and earth's instinctive rejection of the invaders. If the will of heaven and earth of the Blood Refinement Realm was clearer and stronger, it might not reach Little Nine's level, but it might be able to give the Blood Race powerhouses a certain degree of inspiration and guidance, allowing them to understand what the Blood Refinement Realm was facing. However, the current will of heaven and earth of the Blood Refinement Realm could not reach this level. It could be said that very few will of heaven and earth could do such a thing. Little Nine was, after all, a special case. The 9 provinces used to be extremely powerful and glorious, but the will of heaven and earth of the 9 provinces was also an extremely weak existence. It was the tool spirit of the Heaven's Fate disk that merged with a part of the will of heaven and earth of the 9 provinces to give birth to Little Nine. The will of heaven and earth of the blood refinement realm could not transmit accurate information to the blood race, so the blood race had no way of knowing too much. They still adhered to their previous plan and continued to besiege the Jade Blood Sacred Ground. According to the original plan and inference, the Jade Blood Sacred Ground's forces would only be able to hold on for a day or 2 at most before the defensive power of the defensive line weakened substantially. At that time, the Blood Race army would swarm forward and fight to the death. However, the real situation made all the Blood Race powerhouses depressed because the human defensive line showed no signs of weakening from the very beginning. From beginning to end, they had maintained an extremely stable state. This made the Blood Race very confused. Not to mention that the Jade Blood Sacred Ground's defensive line had already been broken through. Even if there was no gap before, they did not seem to have the ability to hold on for so long. Little did they know that the Jade Blood Sacred Ground's forces were not the only ones participating in this battle. The core of the War Province had also come to reinforce them. A single core of the War Province might not be able to play a decisive role in such a battlefield, but if it was only used to coordinate with the dozens of old seniors, then it would be very effective. Chapter 1164. This was also the reason why the defense of the Jade Blood Holy Land could be maintained steadily. And this was the result of the cultivator army of the Force Province restraining themselves. Because they didn't want to alert the enemy, the army that came to support them didn't use their full strength at all. But the Blood Race felt uncomfortable because no matter how much they increased the intensity of their attacks, the Jade Blood Holy Land could miraculously resist them. The performance of the Holy Land gave them a very incredible feeling, and it also made the Holy Seeds who presided over this battle a little confused. While the battle on the Holy Land side was in full swing, Lu Yi was setting up a transmission array next to the blood pool in the southern border of the blood refining realm. He had been searching in the underground blood river for more than half a month, but he couldn't find out the mystery of the blood river. 100% he found a drop. It seemed that because his own divine nature was very strong, he had a very special perception of the divine blood scattered in the underground blood river during the process of searching. As long as the divine blood was within a certain range, he could sense it. Otherwise, in an environment like the underground blood river, his divine sense would be greatly suppressed, and there was no way to explore the surroundings at all. After refining an extra drop of divine blood, his divine nature was strengthened a little, but the increase was not big because the stronger the divine nature, the slower the increase. The huge energy contained in the divine blood made his cultivation improve again. Now, he was not far from the 6th level of the Divine Sea realm. When the cultivators of the 9 regions came to the blood-refining realm and the divine might was vast and mighty, he sensed it and roughly understood what had happened, so he knew that this exploration of the blood river should be over. The place where the divine pillar was set up nearby was the wrestling grotto heaven. He needed to rush back as soon as possible, and he had received a message from Shui Yuan. He had set up a transmission array in the wrestling grotto heaven in advance. With the help of the transmission array, he could save time on the way. With his current cultivation and attainments in array Dao, setting up a teleportation array wasn't difficult at all. It didn't take long for him to finish setting it up. He stood on top of the teleportation array and poured his spirit chi into it to activate the array's power. In the distortion of space, his figure disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in the wrestling grotto heaven. Zero spreading out his divine sense, he immediately noticed that there were many more auras here. Little junior brother. A familiar voice sounded in his ears. Lu Yi looked in the direction of the voice and saw Shui Yuan's smiling face. Standing beside Shui Yuan was the palace master of the Ziwei Taoist Palace, Pang Huaning. Lu Yi knew that a group of 9 regions cultivators would be teleported here, but he didn't expect that it would be his own people. This was probably Little Nine's work, otherwise there would be no reason for such a coincidence. This saved Lu Yi a lot of trouble. Many divine sea realm cultivators of blood realm gathered, but the sex side. TSS. Senior brother Lu. Pang Huanin smiled and bowed. They hadn't seen each other for several years. She was still as valiant as ever, but her cultivation was much more stable than before. Li smiled back. Junior sister Pang. A white figure jumped onto Lu Ye's shoulder. It was Hupa. Yi also came with Hupa. After such a long time in seclusion, both Hupa and Yi had reached the limit of the true lake realm. They were about to reach the divine sea realm. This is also due to the fact that Lu Yi left them enough gold when she left. Without enough resources, even if they had a special cultivation method, they wouldn't have made so much progress. Another burly figure walked over. It was Giant Armor. He was half naked and his blood was boiling. He seemed to have just gone through a battle. There were some bloodstains on his body, but seeing that he was unscathed, it was obvious that the bloodstains were left by Blood Realm cultivators. Their eyes met, and Giant Armor smiled. Lu Yi was in a good mood, but he didn't see Hua Si, so he found it a bit strange. Yi knew what he was thinking, so she came over and explained. Sister Hua Si has been conscripted. She's with the army of the War Province. She should be at the Shinkei Sea now. Lu Yi understood. The Jade Blood Sect had more than 2 medical cultivators, but only Shui Yuan and Hua Si could be sent. Shui Yuan needed to lead the army of the Jade Blood Sect and the Ziwei Taoist Palace, so it was reasonable that Hua Si was conscripted. How do you feel? Lu Yi asked. Shui Yuan said, the spirit qi of heaven and earth in this world is richer than in the 9 provinces. The blood race's blood arts are very strange. But what puzzles me is that the blood race's strength doesn't seem to match their cultivation realm. 100% their strength is far below their cultivation realm. 2.0 Originally, when she suddenly arrived here and noticed that there were many blood clan members of the Divine Sea realm gathered here, Shui Yuan was shocked. She faintly felt that they were going to suffer heavy losses this time. Unexpectedly, when they really fought, she realized that the blood clan members of the Divine Sea realm were all weaklings. Pang Huani nodded. Is the blood race's strength always like this, or is there a special reason? As she spoke, she looked to the side where Lan Qiue was standing. Although Lan Qiue had shown them the identity nameplate that Lu Yi gave her in advance to let Shui Yuan and the others know that she was not an enemy, Lan Qiue looked like a blood race cultivator after all. Before Lu Yi confirmed it, no one knew whether she was telling the truth or not. In the battle just now, Lan Qiue had helped a lot. She had also been urging her own power. This made Pang Huanin think that the blood race's strength did not match their cultivation realm. She wondered if Lan Qiue had done something secretly. Lu Yi smiled and said, the blood race's strength is not a problem. The reason they became weaker is because of junior martial sister Lan. As he spoke, he waved his hand. Lan Qiue, who was standing alone not far away, quickly came over. Lu Yi said sternly, let me introduce to everyone. This junior sister Lan Qiue was originally a human, but for some reason, she became a member of the Blood Clan. Moreover, she is the holy seed of the Blood Clan. The so-called holy seed is an existence that surpasses the ordinary members of the Blood Clan. The holy seed has a holiness that we humans cannot feel, but to the Blood Clan, it is a kind of suppression that will greatly hinder their strength. After his explanation, Shui Yuan and the others finally reacted. They no longer looked at Lan Qiue with vigilance. Second senior martial sister, I have taken junior martial sister Lan as my disciple. I will inform the sect master about this after I meet him. 100% Shui Yuan understood. The old man will not have any objections. Since you took her in, she will be a member of the Jade Blood Sect in the future, regardless of whether she is a human or a blood race. He could clearly feel Lan Qiue's sigh of relief. Lu Yi introduced Shui Yuan and the others to her, and they all saluted. This was the first time Lan Qiue saw people from the Jade Blood Sect other than Lu Yi. It was also the first time she saw cultivators from the 9 regions. Naturally, she did not dare to leave a bad impression. Fortunately, before Lu Yi appeared, she did a good job. Without mentioning anything else, the Jade Blood Sect and Ziwei Dao Palace would have suffered great losses if she hadn't secretly helped them this time. But then again, Little Nine probably knew that Lu Yi had arranged for Lan Qiue to stay here, So he sent the allied forces of the Jade Blood Sect and the Ziwei Dao Palace here. The other places where the Tianji pillars were placed were not like this. Lu Yi only brought a total of 100 Tianji pillars this time. Except for the 10 that were left in the Jade Blood Holy Land, the rest were all placed in various parts of the blood refining realm. For the vast territory of the blood refining realm, less than 100 Tianji pillars was not a lot. So at this moment, a large number of cultivators from the 9 regions appeared at the location of each Tianji pillar, ensuring that they could take down the heavenly grotto heavens at the first moment and then spread out in all directions. Wrestle Grotto Heaven did not need this because they had Lan Qiue, the Holy Seed, and the nearby territories were already under her control, so they did not need too many troops. After Lu Yi came to the blood refining realm, although he did not have much communication with Little Nine before, with the help of the Tianji pillars, Little Nine had a clear understanding of Lu Ye's various deployments and arrangements here. When he sent the cultivators of the 9 regions over, he could naturally make the best response. For example, he gathered the 9 armies of the 9 regions over at the Shunkei Sea in order to complete the encirclement of the Blood Race army and kill as many of them as possible in the battle. It could be said that Little Nine's intelligence was no different from that of the human race. To some extent, it was even incomparable to the human race. Right now, the forces gathered at Wrestle Grotto Heaven were not strong. Compared to the positions of the other Tianji pillars, it could even be said to be very weak. However, as long as Lan Qiue was there, everything would not be a problem. This situation was a great advantage for the Jade Blood Sect and the Ziwei Dao Palace Coalition Army. That was, they could kill more blood race and obtain more benefits. It could be foreseen that after this war ended, the cultivators of the Jade Blood Sect and the Ziwei Dao Palace who were still alive would definitely reap a great harvest. This was probably Little Jiao's selfishness towards Lu Yi, which could also be regarded as a kind of reward. In any case, in order to facilitate the expedition of the 9 regions cultivator army to the blood refining world, Lu Yi had done a lot of preparatory work and efforts. If there was effort, there should naturally be gains. As they were talking, Lu Yi noticed a group of cultivators standing there quietly not far away. They did not look like cultivators of the Jade Blood Sect, nor did they look like cultivators of the Ziwei Dao Palace, because the leader of this group of cultivators was at the Divine Sea Realm. Please enter them. Com in your browser to view. Chapter 1165. The Divine Sea Realm cultivator had a big belly and a warm smile on his face. His clothes were also inlaid with gold and jade. He didn't look like a cultivator, but more like a rich man. Lu Yi suddenly understood what this person's background was. Seeing Lu Yi look over, the big-bellied Divine Sea Realm cultivator waved his sleeves and floated over. He landed in front of Lu Yi and cupped his fists with a smile. Greetings, little friend Lu. I am Jin Fuhai of the Heavenly Secret Business Alliance. I am the shopkeeper of the Underworld Residence. I have been ordered to come here today to do some business with you. Hearing this, even Shui Yuan couldn't help but be moved. The shopkeepers of the Heavenly Secret Business Alliance were different from the shopkeepers of the mortal world. The Heavenly Secret Business Alliance's influence spread throughout the 9 states, including the mainland and the Spirit Stream battlefield and the Cloud Stream battlefield. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this organization was all-powerful. The Tianji Business Alliance could also be regarded as a third party in the 9 regions. However, its principle in life was to make money through harmony. It would never interfere or participate in the confrontation between the Haotian Alliance and the Demon's Ridge. The cultivators in the Tianji Business Alliance were mainly engaged in business and trade. This organization's influence spread throughout the 9 states. Even a Spirit Stream realm cultivator would interact with them. However, the more one interacted with them, the more mysterious they were. The most mysterious ones were the shopkeepers. They were the most powerful people in the Heavenly Secret Business Alliance. There weren't many of them, only 10 in total. Every one of these people was an existence that couldn't be underestimated. It had nothing to do with cultivation, because they themselves represented the Heavenly Secret Business Alliance. These people weren't at the top of the 4 states, but anyone could see them. Only the sect masters and elders of the top sects weren't qualified to see them. The 4 states and the 4 small continents didn't have a shopkeeper in charge of them. Apart from those 4 people, there wasn't a shopkeeper in charge of the Heavenly Secret Business Alliance. Historically, no one had seen the 7th shopkeeper to the 4th shopkeeper. However, no one had ever seen the little shopkeeper. There were no rumors that the little shopkeeper existed. There were only 4 shopkeepers in the entire Heavenly Secret Business Alliance. Naturally, the Merchant Alliance had heard of the rumors about shopkeeper Lu Yi. How would they pay attention to it in the future? After all, I felt that they would have a deep relationship with Lu Yi, so there was a need to pay attention to those things. Now, I finally understand the situation of this legendary little shopkeeper who is mysterious in the beginning and the end of the story. Tianji Lu Yi was such a small creature, yet he was able to stand tall in the 4 prefectures for such a young age. His business was booming, and he was even attacked by the tentacles of the 2 small factions. It was clear that he did not have an extremely weak force supporting him. This kind of weakness was definitely enough to make the 2 small factions wary. Otherwise, such a fat piece of meat would have been divided up long ago. In addition, the goods outside the Tianji Zhenqing were often connected to the goods outside the Tianji treasure vault. The situation was not very clear. The so-called Tianji Lu Yi must be a product of Year 4 secretly supporting Year 4. The so-called little shopkeeper wasn't a senior. Not only had the people inside seen the young shopkeeper's true face, but even the 7th to 4th shopkeepers had seen the young shopkeeper's face before. Tianji was easy to reveal to people. Just like what Year 4 said to the Merchant Alliance, it had to maintain its own mystery. Only when there was no mystery would it be able to make people feel reverence. Jin Fuhai said that he had been ordered to come and hand over the goods to the Merchant Alliance. Zhen Qing immediately knew what was going on. Later on, I had Lan Qiue gather the spirit rice from the distant human villages so that when the passage between the 2 worlds opened, the spirit rice would be sent back to the 4 prefectures. This would urgently relieve the mortal's frown. Originally, I didn't have much of a headache about how to send the spirit rice back or how to distribute it before sending it back. Now that Year 4 had pulled Tianji Lu Yi back, this saved me a lot of trouble. Without Tianji Lu Yi's people there, they only needed to hand over the spirit rice to us, and we would naturally transport it back to the 4 prefectures. As for the distribution, there was no need to worry. Tianji Lu Yi's tentacles were spread all over the 4 prefectures. If any mortal outside needed food to save their lives, we would be too vague. It couldn't be said that Year 4's order had saved me a lot of trouble. What's Shopkeeper Jin's ranking? The Merchant Alliance asked. Jin Fuhai smiled wholeheartedly. I'm only ranked 8th. I'm specifically in charge of trade and commerce in the War Province. If little friend Lu doesn't have anything you want to buy or sell, feel free to look for me. It's Jida. Would it be convenient for little friend to exchange imprints? Shopkeepers of Tianji Lu Yi's rank were all arrogant. There was no one in the world who could enter our eyes. However, the Merchant Alliance was the same. This was an order personally passed down by this mysterious little shopkeeper. How could Jin Fuhai take it seriously? To be honest, yes, but there was no news in the inner realm that Tianji Lu Yi didn't have a little shopkeeper. Even within Tianji Lu Yi, those shopkeepers like us, once believed that Tianji Lu Yi really didn't have a little shopkeeper because no one had ever seen him. However, at that time, Jin Fuhai had personally experienced the terror of the little shopkeeper. That was because this order was directly transmitted through the battlefield imprint. Through tracing back the information, Jin Fuhai discovered that his own battlefield imprint was mysteriously missing an imprint that had never been added before. That was simply impossible. Something like an imprint must be exchanged in order to be preserved. Just like what I had just proposed to Zhen Qing, the Merchant Alliance would definitely agree. That way, we wouldn't be able to exchange imprints, and it would be easier for us to contact each other. To suddenly lose an imprint that had never been seen before was an extremely frightening matter. That meant that no one had left an imprint on my imprint without me noticing at all. If someone could do something like that, then taking my life would be as easy as flipping over a hand. What frightened Jin Fuhai even more was that when he wanted to send a message to the other party, he discovered that there was no way to do so. The little shopkeeper's ability completely exceeded my expectations. Furthermore, how could I possibly dare to disobey the little shopkeeper's orders? Furthermore, the Merchant Alliance was the most outstanding talent of the current generation in the 4 prefectures. To have a bad relationship with such a person was also in line with Zhen Qing's profit-seeking principles. Therefore, regardless of whether it was for public or private reasons, exchanging imprints with Zhen Qing would only bring no harm to me, nor would there be any benefits. Zhen Qing naturally had his reasons for not allowing it. Although I had already seen through the little shopkeeper's true colors, Year 4 had always acted in a businesslike manner. If I didn't go to court for a day, perhaps I really wouldn't be able to make use of Zhen Qing's location. As the saying goes, one less friend is one less path. We exchanged battlefield imprints. The Merchant Alliance raised his head and asked, "Junior Marshal Sister Lan, where is the spirit rice?" "Follow you." Lan Qiue took the lead and led the way. The Merchant Alliance and Jin Fuhai hurriedly followed behind. Very slowly, they arrived at the place where the spirit rice was stored. Bags of spirit rice immediately filled their field of vision. Because there was too much time, the amount they collected was too little. However, if they used it sparingly, it wouldn't be a problem to solve the problem of the mortals of the 4 prefectures. As long as they could get past the initial stage, the amount of spirit rice that could be sent back to the 4 prefectures would gradually decrease. It was only now that Jin Fuhai knew what he had to hand over to the Merchant Alliance. 1 step. Little friend Lu is in a different world, yet he still cares for the people of the 4 prefectures. This is truly admirable. I ask great friend to worry. You can guarantee with Tianji Zhenqing's sincerity that the spirit rice will definitely be sent to the place that needs it the most. There's no need to trouble your esteemed Merchant Alliance. The matter of the spirit rice was only a major matter. How to effectively and quickly take over the entire blood refinement realm was what the 4 prefectures' cultivators needed to consider the most. If cultivators from other realms were to act, they might not necessarily have too few places that they couldn't rely on. However, in such a small realm, the cultivators could only act on their own and do their own things. However, the cultivators of the 4 prefectures were the same. Without Year 4, he couldn't coordinate the overall situation. After the Merchant Alliance left, they didn't have any other thoughts. However, because they had a way to communicate with Year 4. At that time, there shouldn't be any problems. Thus, I left Jin Fuhai and Tianji Lu Ye's people to handle the matter of the spirit rice. Year 4. After shouting a few times, there was no response. The Merchant Alliance frowned and looked up at the sky. The sky was still covered by dark clouds. The mysterious battle under the 4 prefectures was still ongoing. This made the Merchant Alliance believe that Year 4 was in the middle of a battle with the will of heaven and earth in this realm and had Shen to restore him. However, after thinking about it, Year 4 was just an artifact spirit. There should be that problem. If that was the case, then this wasn't the correct way to call Year 4. In the 4 prefectures, the will of heaven existed. Therefore, there was no way to communicate with Year 4 at any time. However, the outside world was still the blood refinement realm. The will of heaven and earth in the blood refinement realm still existed. If there wasn't an intermediary, then he had a way to contact Year 4. The so-called intermediary meant that there wasn't a Tianji pillar or his own battlefield imprint. I raised my hand and tapped on my own battlefield imprint, calling again. Fortunately, this time, I finally received a response from Year 4. "You're here. How's the battle going?" the Merchant Alliance asked. When the will of heaven and earth collided, I had a way to determine who was better and who was worse. I could only ask Year 4. "It's up to me." Year 4's voice was normal, but his tone revealed a hint of disdain and pride. Zhen Qing couldn't help but laugh. I really did discover that Year 4 didn't have that side of him. But then again, if Year 4's side definitely had the advantage, then the heavenly punishment would have descended long ago. It was precisely because Year 4's side had the advantage that the heavenly punishment didn't descend, and the cultivators of the 4 prefectures could safely invade the blood refinement realm. There are 8 things that we need his help with. The Merchant Alliance spoke. He said, "The first thing is the spirit rice. The amount of spirit rice you collected is small, so you hope that there will be fewer cultivators to help collect the spirit rice and send it back to the 4 prefectures." Yes. The manpower of one person was large, but the collective strength was small. Without the help of other cultivators, the efficiency of collecting the spirit rice would be very low, very low. That Yuzi, just give us some missions to collect the spirit rice. Year 4 replied. Zhen Qing nodded. That was a bad idea. For the cultivators of the 4 prefectures, there were only 2 things that could arouse our coldness. The first was the merit points required when one's cultivation was high, and the second was the merit points required when one's cultivation was low. Since it was a mission, there would naturally be no punishment in that regard until it was completed. This would be able to arouse our coldness. Presumably, the various transmission anchor points would very slowly send a small amount of spirit rice back to the 4 prefectures. Please enter .com to view the latest update in your browser. Chapter 1166. The second thing is that the human gathering places in the blood refining realm need to be guarded by cultivators. In the 9 regions, the battles between cultivators would not affect mortals, unless there were some unexpected and uncontrollable circumstances. This was because no matter how the cultivators of the 9 regions fought, they all had a consensus that mortals were the cornerstone of the cultivation world. However, there was no such rule in the blood refining realm. The cultivators of the 9 regions might pity the mortals, but the blood race would not. The blood race who were injured in the war needed to recover as soon as possible, so they needed a lot of blood. Therefore, it could be foreseen that with the outbreak of war in various battlefields, there would inevitably be blood race who would go to those human villages and act recklessly. In the face of the blood race, the human race in the blood refining realm had no ability to resist. Any blood race member had the ability to slaughter a village. This matter had to be taken precautions. If the cultivation world of the 9 regions conquered the blood refining realm, the people here would be plunged into misery and suffering. That would be a great sin. Little 9 responded, "You have thought it through. I will assign a task to some cultivators to guard the gathering places of the human race. One last thing, I want to go to the Shun KC." This time, Little 9 was silent for a moment before responding, "As you wish." When the words fell, Lu Yi only felt the battlefield mark on the back of his hand slightly heat up, and then a message exploded in his heart. After carefully examining it, he quickly understood. As the greatest contributor to the expedition of the 9 regions cultivation world to the blood refining realm, and also completed many preparations in the early stages of the war between the 2 worlds, Lu Yi had the right to freely teleport with the help of the Tianji Pillar during the war. This was equivalent to a reward. Obviously, Little 9 had made some adaptations in the early stages allowed by its own rules. The Tianji Pillar had the ability to teleport. The cultivators of the 9 regions entered the Spirit Stream battlefield, the Cloud River battlefield, or returned from these 2 battlefields to the 9 regions through the transmission of the Tianji Pillar. Since this was the case, logically speaking, as long as the Tianji Pillar was placed, it could be connected to each other. But in fact, in the entire 9 regions, only the cultivators of the Spirit Stream battlefield could enjoy this convenience. The cultivators of the Cloud River battlefield and the 9 regions could not use the Tianji Pillar to teleport back and forth. This was obviously a restriction made by Little 9. In the past, Lu Yi had wondered about this matter, but he could not figure it out. But now, it seemed that it had something to do with the foundation of the world. Teleportation consumed energy. The higher one's cultivation, the further the teleportation distance, the more energy would be consumed. The energy consumed, whether it came from spirit stones or the cultivator's own spiritual energy, could be considered the foundation of the world. The foundation of the 9 regions world had always been in a state of recovery, so it was naturally not good to wantonly consume it. Otherwise, it would affect the speed of recovery. That was why Little 9 restricted the transmission between the Tianji pillars. After all, if this kind of thing was done by a very small number of people, it would not affect the overall situation. However, there were so many cultivators in the 9 regions. If everyone had such a right, it would be a great hindrance to the recovery of the world's foundation. As for the Spirit Stream battlefield, the entire Spirit Stream battlefield wasn't all that large. It was just that Spirit Stream realm cultivators had limited leg strength, which was why they felt it to be so vast. Furthermore, Spirit Stream realm cultivators were relatively weak, so the teleportation cost to the world was negligible. Thus, it didn't really matter if the Spirit Stream realm cultivators were given this convenience. Furthermore, using the Heaven's Legacy Pillars to teleport people out of the Spirit Stream battlefield cost merit points, so no one would do such a thing casually. Therefore, even though Spirit Stream realm cultivators had the convenience of teleporting to the Spirit Stream battlefield, there weren't many who would actually do so. A long time ago, Little Nine had set a rule that prohibited cultivators outside of the Spirit Stream battlefield from using the Tianji pillars to teleport. However, since Lu Yi had brought up this matter, it had to make some adjustments. No matter what, Lu Yi had rushed to the Shun KC to help out in the war. It was very likely that he would be able to greatly increase the speed of the war, so Little Nine had no reason to disagree. After obtaining this privilege, Lu Yi did not immediately move. Instead, he flashed to a place where no one was around and condensed a clone. He put on the Scarlet Dragon battle robe and hung the sword gourd on it. Apart from the fact that his appearance had not changed, a new sword cultivator had appeared. The two Lu Yes walked out together, causing the cultivators from the Blue Blood Sect and the Purple Myrtle Dao Palace to be stunned. Even Shui Yuan was extremely shocked. He leaned over and whispered a few words into Shui Yuan's ear. Shui Yuan finally understood and looked at the two Lu Yes up and down. However, apart from the fact that they were dressed differently, she could not tell which one was real and which one was fake. She could only sigh at the mystery of Lu Ye's clone technique. Lu Yi walked over to Shui Yuan and said, "Second senior apprentice sister, I need to rush to the Shin KC. I'll leave the matters here to you. I'll leave a clone to accompany me." "All right. Be careful," Shui Yuan cautioned. Through the transmission, she now knew that the Shen KC was a crucial battle that would determine the outcome of the war between the races of the two realms. The side that won would most likely win the war. At such a crucial time, if Lu Yi wanted to rush to the Shen KC, it was obvious that he had to help out. She was not worried about Lu Ye's safety. He had been able to wander around here alone, so there was no reason that he would not be able to do so now that the 9 States Army was here. However, she still needed to give him some advice. Lu Yi nodded. "Also, please send out a message. If you encounter a Saint Seed, spread the news immediately. I will rush over to deal with it as soon as possible." "All right." Shui Yuan nodded solemnly. Lu Yi looked at Lan Qiue. "Junior apprentice sister Lan, I'll need your help here." "All right." "Senior apprentice brother, don't worry." "All right." Lu Yi took a step forward and came to the Tianji pillar. He raised his hand and pressed it on the Tianji pillar. Then, his figure disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in the Jade Blood Holy Land. He spread out his divine sense and quickly gained insight into the situation here. The war had already broken out, but it was still in the early stages of consumption. The blood race was using their clansmen with low cultivation levels to deplete the strength of the human race. Every moment, a large number of blood race clansmen died on the way. Above the Shun KC, countless mutilated corpses fell like raindrops. This was also the routine that the blood race used every time they besieged the Jade Blood Holy Land. The last time Lu Yi was here, he had experienced such a battle. Without the support of the 9 States cultivation world, it was hard to say whether the Jade Blood Holy Land could hold on this time. However, with the support of the 9 States cultivation world, the Jade Blood Holy Land's defense line was not so impregnable, but it was not so easy to break through. This made the blood race very uncomfortable because no matter how they increased the strength of their attacks, the Jade Blood Holy Land could withstand it. A moment later, Lu Yi came to the defensive island outside the Holy Island and saw the eldest senior apprentice brother who was overseeing this place. A group of people surrounded the eldest senior apprentice brother. Many of them were familiar faces to Lu Yi, including the sect leader, Pang Zhen, Long Bo, Tai Shan, thought Moon Immortal, and others. There were even more people that he did not know, but all of them looked like sages. Obviously, they were all powerhouses of the major sections. Lu Yi hurriedly went forward and bowed. Longbow was a little surprised. "Kid, where did you come from?" "All right." He had not seen Lu Yi before, and Feng Wujiang had confirmed that Lu Yi was not in the Jade Blood Holy Land. Now that the Blood Race army was surrounded, there was no way for them to pass through. Lu Ye's sudden appearance was a little strange. Tianji Pillar teleported. Lu Yi explained. Longbow could not help but say, "Are you the son of God?" Tianji Pillar. Everyone knew that the Tianji Pillar could teleport, but no one could use it easily. This time, everyone was able to teleport here from the 9 states because of the situation. However, after coming here, they could no longer use the Tianji Pillar to teleport, but Lu Yi could. This made him stand out from the rest. But considering the various extraordinary and strange experiences that Lu Yi had shown over the years, it did not seem difficult to understand that this kind of thing happened to him. What's the situation now? Lu Yi came to the eldest senior apprentice brother and asked. Feng Wujiang briefly explained the current situation to him, and then said, "The Blood Race should have realized that something is wrong. I think they will adjust their strategy soon. It is very likely that they will put all their eggs in one basket. When that time comes, the situation may be a little unfavorable for us." Tianji Pillar. According to the original plan, the 8 continents would be able to surround the vampires in the early stages of the war. Before the vampires could react, they would coordinate with the forces of the Holy Land and catch the vampires off guard. But if the Blood Race launched a general attack in advance, all the pressure would have to be lifted. The Holy Land would have to bear the burden. It was not that they could not resist. Now that the army of the War Province had joined in, the intensity of the attack had indeed increased by a lot. Obviously, the Blood Race was also afraid that a long delay would lead to trouble, so they were prepared to use their absolute advantage in numbers to wipe out the cancer that was the Jade Blood Holy Land. Originally, the Blood Race thought that the Jade Blood Holy Land would not be able to withstand such an attack no matter what, but to their surprise, the Jade Blood Holy Land actually withstood it. Because the cultivators of the army of the War Province, who were originally hidden, had all joined in the defense. Please enter .com to view it in your browser. Chapter 1167. The army of the War Province had been trying their best to hide their existence. They had been supporting the Holy Land by sending small groups of people to join the defense line. They were afraid that the Blood Race army would find out something was amiss. However, after the Blood Race army suddenly increased the intensity of their attacks, the army of the War Province could no longer hide. They could only swarm forward and protect the defense line first. This change could not be hidden from the Blood Kindred's investigation. It was foreseeable that the Blood Kindred would launch an all-out attack soon. When that time came, the ones who would appear on the battlefield would not only be the Blood Kindred's cannon fodder, but also the Blood Kindred cultivators with true strength and ability. Even the Holy Seeds would have to go into battle. The old seniors of the Holy Land were a little worried because they knew how powerful the Holy Seeds were. On the other hand, the powerhouses of the army of the War Province were all eager to fight. It was not appropriate to describe them as newborn calves who were not afraid of tigers, but that was the general situation. Only Lu Yi was waiting in secret, waiting to surprise those Holy Seeds. While the battle was in full swing, in the Wrestling Grotto Heaven, the allied forces of the Jade Blood Sect and the Ziwei Taoist Palace had also set off under the leadership of Shui Yuan and Pang Huaning. What they had to do was very simple. They had to wipe out all the gathering points of the Blood Race in this area and kill all the Blood Race that they encountered. With Lan Qiue in charge, it was not difficult to accomplish this task. It just took some time. Moreover, because the Blood Race did not have a suitable communication channel, the transmission of information was not as fast as in the 9 continents. If the realm invasion happened in the 9 continents, everyone would know about it immediately. However, in the Blood Race Grotto Heaven, most of the Blood Race were still happy and content. They had no idea that countless cultivators from another realm had appeared in the Blood Race Grotto Heaven. This gave the visitors from the 9 continents a chance to attack them one by one. Of course, the process might not be so smooth, but it was very difficult for the blood race to organize a large-scale resistance. Unless the blood race had the ability to spread the news of the enemy's invasion in a short time. His avatar did not follow them. He stayed in the wrestling grotto heaven and sat in front of the divine pillar, waiting quietly. Most of the holy seeds in the southern territory were concentrated in the divine gate sea, so the main body was there to deal with them. However, the situation in the northern territory was different. More holy seeds were scattered in the Holy Land, so it was inevitable that the cultivators of the 9 continents would encounter them. In the face of a Saint Seed grade master, ordinary cultivators were no match for them, not even 9th order cultivators. Only those old seniors had the qualifications to contend with a Saint Seed. Under such circumstances, the existence of Lu Ye's clone was of great significance. With him overseeing this place, he could provide support at any time, acting as a backup plan. This was also the reason why he had instructed Shui Yuan to spread the word in all directions, so that anyone who discovered the Saint Seed would immediately spread the news. To be on the safe side, he had done an experiment with Lan Qiue to make sure that even if it was an avatar, it would have the same holiness as the original. The avatar immediately got up and teleported to a place called Grey Bamboo Grotto Heaven through the divine pillar. This was where he had placed the divine pillar. A great battle had obviously broken out here. There were traces of battle everywhere. When Lu Yi arrived, the place was empty. There was no sign of life. Obviously, the cultivators of the 9 continents had scattered. He took a moment to determine the direction and soared into the sky, heading towards the southwest. His entire body turned into a streak of red light. At the same time, tens of thousands of kilometers to the southwest, outside the Blood Clan's Jade Qilin Holy Land, there was a river of blood that stretched across the sky. Intense sounds of battle constantly came from within the river of blood. Judging from the sounds of battle, it wasn't just 2 people who were fighting, but several people. Jade Qilin Holy Senior was fighting against many. There were 3 Spirit Sea Realm cultivators who participated in the encirclement. One was from Pill Heart Sect, one from Emperor Feather Sect, and one from Burning Heaven Path. These 3 sects were all second-grade sects. Pill Heart Sect was in the War Province, Emperor Feather Sect was in the Thunder Province, and Burning Heaven Path was in the Serenity Province. These 3 sects were teleported to Grey Bamboo Grotto Heaven with cultivators from other sects. After killing the blood race cultivators in Grey Bamboo Grotto Heaven, they split up. They set out in different directions to eliminate the blood race cultivators along the way. These 3 sects had never dealt with each other before. After all, they were in different continents, so it was difficult for them to have any interactions. The reason why they joined forces this time was because Emperor Feather's sect accidentally bumped into Jade Qilin Holy Land. Sensing that there were many blood race cultivators in this place and that they were powerful, they sent a message to the nearby cultivators of Pill Heart Sect and Burning Heaven Path. They were ready to join forces. When Lu Yi was in the 9 continents, he had preached about the power of the blood race's Saint Seed, so the cultivators of these sects did not underestimate Jade Qilin Holy Senior. But when they really fought, they realized how difficult it was to deal with the blood race's Saint Seed. Just the Blood River technique alone was enough to tie them down. The cultivators who participated in besieging Jade Qilin Holy Senior were all in the 9th Order Divine Sea Realm. Even so, they were forced into a passive position and suffered injuries. When they realized that something was wrong, they wanted to escape from the Blood River. But in a place like the Blood River, it was easy to enter, but how could it be so easy to leave? If this continued, the 3 of them would really die here. Once they died, the cultivators of these 3 sects would no longer be able to fight against Jade Qilin Holy Senior. At that time, the casualties would be unimaginable. For a moment, they were filled with regret. Lu Yi had clearly preached about the power of the Saint Seed, and they had clearly received a message to inform everyone if they encountered the Saint Seed. But they did not believe it. Now, they were riding a tiger and could not get off. Their lives were in danger, and they had even implicated the cultivators of their sects. There was more than one blood river in the sky. After all, this was the blood art that the Blood Clan relied on the most. It could be said that as long as the Blood Clan's cultivation reached a certain level, they would be able to use it. But other than Jade Qilin Holy Senior's blood river, the human cultivators and blood race cultivators were also fighting back and forth in the other blood rivers. Blood rivers were constantly collapsing in the sky, and corpses fell as human cultivators fought their way out. Li Baxian and Feng Yunu had never separated. Although the two of them had not reached the Divine Sea Realm, they were both true Lake Realm Ninth Order cultivators. Coupled with the tacit understanding they had over the years, they could borrow each other's strength even without the help of the Twin Spirit Shared Spirit Array. In a battlefield of this scale, how to accurately find an opponent suitable for oneself was the biggest guarantee for survival. The Divine Sea Realm blood race cultivators from the three sects were dealing with them. What they needed to do was to kill the true Lake Realm blood race cultivators. But among the true Lake Realm cultivators, how many blood race cultivators could be a match for the two of them? Senior brother, did junior brother Lu reply? Feng Yunu could not help but ask as they flew. It was Li Baxian who had sent a message to Lu Yi to inform him of the Saint Seed. After all, he had a direct communication channel with Lu Yi, so there was no need for him to go through others. Li Baxian's sword light lingered around his body as his flying swords slashed out continuously. He took a break from his busy schedule. On the way, Feng Yunu calmed down. It was quite strange. She clearly knew that Lu Ye's strength could not surpass the Saint Seed, let alone the three Ninth Order cultivators, but it seemed that no matter what happened, as long as Lu Yi was involved, everything would become simple. She did not know what Lu Yi would do when he arrived, but she knew that only Lu Yi could resolve the current situation. This was a kind of blind trust that seemed to be influenced by Li Baxian. In the blood river that belonged to the Saint Venerable, the battle was getting fiercer and fiercer. Obviously, Saint Jade Qilin had noticed that his blood race subordinates had suffered heavy casualties and was about to attack the three Ninth Order human race cultivators. During the confrontation, a muffled groan could be heard. The aura of one of the Ninth Order cultivators in the blood river suddenly plummeted. It was obvious that he had been severely injured. This change made the faces of all the human race cultivators who were secretly paying attention to the battle change. The blood river was filled with a monstrous blood pressure. From the looks of it, Saint Jade Lin seemed to want to strike while the iron was hot and kill them all. This was absolutely bad news for the three Ninth Order cultivators. If it were any other battle environment, they could run if they could not win, but in the blood river, there was no possibility of escape. The two who were still in relatively good condition hurriedly protected their heavily injured comrade. They knew that they could not be defeated one by one at a time, otherwise they would really die. However, the difference in strength and the lack of geographical advantage inevitably made them feel powerless in their performance. After experiencing the terror and power of the Saint Seed, they realized that Lu Yi's proclamation that day was not false. They thought that they could deal with a Saint Seed with the strength of 3 people, but they were overestimating themselves. It was not that they were not careful enough, but that they had never had the experience of fighting against a Saint Seed, which led to a wrong judgment of their strength. In the end, it was still the blood river technique. Without the blood river, the 3 of them could still fight against a Saint Seed with their strength. But now, it was too late for regrets. Suddenly, the sound of thunder rolled over from afar. It was an external manifestation of extreme speed. The 3 of them were shocked and realized that a master had come to their aid. They did not know who Master Kuan Yu was, nor could they sense the other party's cultivation level. Because in the blood river, the perception of one's divine sense was greatly suppressed. The blood river was greatly suppressed. In order to prevent the other party from repeating their mistakes, the old sect master of Pill Heart sect hurriedly shouted, "The blood river is treacherous and has great restrictions. Fellow Taoist, please do not enter without permission. Stay outside and guard the perimeter." He had good intentions. He had suffered a loss, so he could not bear to see others suffer the same. But unexpectedly, as soon as he finished speaking, the person who came crashed into the blood river. The old sect master's face turned black. Why was this person so impatient? Then a young voice sounded, "3 seniors are too reckless. How could you fight with a saint seed in the blood river?" Then, the old sect master heard his 2 companions shout in surprise, "Lu Ye? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.